My daughter hit me and I stayed quiet. The next morning I cooked a feast. She smiled and said, "You finally learned," until she saw who was sitting at the table. Before I tell you who was sitting in my dining room and why my daughter ended up in handcuffs, let me introduce myself. My name is Thaddeus Coleman, but everyone in this city used to call me Chef Thad. I am 75 years old. My hands are covered in burn scars and callous from 50 years of handling cast iron skillets and hot grease. I built a restaurant empire from a roadside shack selling ribs and collard greens. I fed mayors, I fed senators, I fed the people who run this city. But to my daughter Vanessa and her husband Brad, I am just a stubborn old man sitting on a pile of assets they are desperate to liquidate. If you have ever been disrespected by the very people you sacrificed your life to raise, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I want to know how far my story travels. The ice pack against my cheek was melting, dripping cold water down my neck onto my pajama collar. I sat in the dark of my bedroom listening. The walls of this house were built in 1972, solid oak beams, plaster, real construction, but they weren't thick enough to block out the sound of my daughter laughing in the living room. She wasn't crying, she wasn't apologizing, she was laughing. "Did you see his face, Brad?" she was saying, her voice muffled but distinct. "He looked like a shocked puppy. I told you, you have to be firm with him. He is like a child now. He doesn't understand reason. He only understands force." I heard the clink of glasses. They were drinking my scotch. The bottle of Blue Label I had saved for my 50th anniversary with Beatrice. Beatrice, my wife, who passed away 3 years ago. The only woman who ever truly understood me. If she were here, Vanessa wouldn't dare raise her voice, let alone her hand. But Beatrice was gone, and I was alone in the dark, nursing a swollen cheekbone and a broken heart. It started at dinner, or what passed for dinner these days. I was in the kitchen cleaning up. I like a clean kitchen. It is a habit from the restaurant days. Mise en place. Everything in its place. Brad was sitting at the table picking his teeth. He is 35 years old, a real estate agent who hasn't sold a house in 2 years. He spends his days talking about cryptocurrency and NFTs and watching videos of 20-year-old billionaires on his phone. He thinks work is for suckers. Vanessa came in holding a folder. I knew that folder. It was the deed to the house. "Dad," she said, tossing the folder onto the table right on top of the placemat Beatrice had embroidered. "We need to talk about the house again." I didn't turn around. I kept scrubbing the skillet. "We have talked about the house, Vanessa. I am not selling. This is where your mother and I lived for 40 years. This is where you grew up. I am not leaving." Vanessa sighed, a loud theatrical sigh. "Dad, be realistic. This place is massive. 4 bedrooms, a half-acre lot. It is too much for you. You are 75. You can barely walk up the stairs." "I can walk fine," I said, drying my hands. "I walk 3 miles every morning." Brad laughed. It was a dry, condescending sound. "Walking to the park to feed the pigeons doesn't count, Thad. Look, this market is hot right now. We checked Zillow. This place is sitting on a gold mine. We could sell it for $800,000 easy, maybe $1 million if we stage it right, and go where I asked, turning to face them. "We found a nice condo complex," Vanessa said quickly. "Assisted living adjacent. It is very modern, Dad. No stairs. They have a cafeteria. You wouldn't have to cook anymore." "I love cooking," I said, my voice hardening. "It is who I am." "You are retired, Dad," Vanessa snapped. "You are done. Look, Brad has an opportunity. A massive opportunity. There is a new crypto coin launching next week. If we get in on the ground floor, we could triple our money in a month. Triple it, Dad. We just need the capital." I looked at them. They didn't want to help me. They wanted to harvest me. I was just a resource to them. A piggy bank they needed to break open to fund their gambling addiction. "I am not selling my home to buy magic internet money for your husband," I said, looking directly at Brad. Brad stood up, his face flushing red. "It is not magic money, Thad. It is the future. You wouldn't understand. You spent your life flipping burgers. This is finance. This is the new economy. I spent my life building a business." I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I spent my life working 18-hour days so my daughter could go to college, so she could marry a man with ambition. Instead, she married a leech." The room went silent. Brad looked at Vanessa, his mouth open. "Did you hear what he called me?" Brad stammered. Vanessa stepped forward. Her eyes were blazing. "Don't you dare talk to him like that. Brad is a visionary. He is trying to help us. He is trying to build a future for this family while you just sit here hoarding your assets waiting to die." I looked at my daughter. I looked for the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. I looked for the teenager I taught to drive. She was gone, replaced by this bitter, greedy stranger. "He is useless, Vanessa," I said, "and you are blind. He has drained your savings. He has maxed out your credit cards. And now he wants my house. The answer is no. It will always be no." Vanessa didn't think. She reacted. She swung her hand. It was a solid slap. She put her hip into it. Her palm connected with my cheekbone with a wet crack that echoed in the kitchen. My head snapped to the side. I stumbled back, catching myself on the counter. My glasses flew off my face and skittered across the floor. The sting was immediate, hot and sharp, but the coldness in my chest was worse. I touched my cheek. I looked at her. Vanessa was breathing hard, her hand still raised. For a second I thought she might apologize. I thought she might realize what she had done. But then Brad chuckled. "Yeah," he said. "Finally. Someone had to knock some sense into him." Vanessa lowered her hand. She didn't look ashamed. She looked empowered. She looked like she enjoyed it. "You need to wake up, Dad," she spat. "You are not the boss anymore. You are a guest in our lives. We are taking over. You are going to sign those papers tomorrow morning. Or else what?" I asked quietly. "Or else we will have you declared incompetent," she said. "We will put you in a home where the nurses don't care if you like to cook, and we will sell the house anyway. So do it the easy way or the hard way." I looked at my glasses on the floor. One of the lenses was cracked. I bent down slowly. My knees popped. I picked up the glasses. I put them in my pocket. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I didn't raise a hand to her. I just turned around and walked out of the kitchen. I heard them laughing as I walked up the stairs. They thought they had won. They thought my silence was submission. They thought they had broken the old man. I walked into my bedroom and locked the door. I sat in the dark, pressing the ice pack to my face. They forgot who I was. They forgot that before I was a chef, I was a man who grew up in the 9th Ward. They forgot that I built a business in a city that didn't want to give loans to black men in the 70s. They forgot that you don't run a kitchen for 50 years without learning how to handle heat. And they definitely didn't know about the phone. I reached under my mattress. I pulled out an old Nokia. It looked like a brick. A relic. Vanessa had laughed at it years ago, telling me to get a smartphone. I had an iPhone for regular calls. But this phone was different. This phone had a prepaid SIM card, and it only had 5 numbers stored in it. I dialed number 1. It rang twice. "Baxter here," a voice answered. It was deep, gravelly. The voice of a man who spent his life in courtrooms destroying people with words. "Reginald, it is." "Thad," I said. "Thad. Why are you calling on the burner? Is everything all right?" "No," I said, touching my swollen cheek. "It is time, Reginald. The house, the will, the safety deposit box, everything we talked about." There was a pause on the line. Did they cross the line, Thad?" "She hit me, Reginald," I said. "My daughter hit me." I heard the sound of a chair scraping back. I heard the rustle of papers. "I am so sorry, Thad." Reginald said, his voice changing from professional to personal. "Are you safe? Do you want me to send police tonight?" "No," I said. "Not tonight. Let them sleep. Let them think they won." "Tomorrow morning," then Reginald asked. "Tomorrow morning," I said. "Bring the papers. Bring the file on Brad. And bring Miller. Miller. The sheriff. You want the sheriff, Thad? That is nuclear. I want them out, Reginald," I said. "I want them gone. And I want them to know exactly who they messed with. Bring Miller. And bring the district attorney if he is available. Tell him there is breakfast involved." Reginald chuckled darkly. "Your biscuits and gravy, Thad. The DA would indict his own mother for a plate of your biscuits." 8 a.m., I said. "Don't knock. Just come in. I will leave the latch off." I hung up. I put the phone back under the mattress. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The neighborhood was quiet. It was a good neighborhood. I had worked hard to live here. I touched my face again. The swelling was going down, but the anger was rising. It was a cold anger, a calculated anger. It was the kind of anger that makes you sharp. They wanted the house. They wanted the money. Tomorrow they were going to get a lesson in ownership. I wasn't just going to kick them out. I was going to destroy their world. I was going to strip them bare. Brad thought he was a finance guru. I knew things about Brad that Vanessa didn't even suspect. I knew where his money really went. I knew about the second credit card. I knew about the business trips to the motel on the edge of town. And Vanessa, my daughter, the woman who raised her hand against the man who gave her life. She was going to learn that you can't inherit what you don't respect. I lay down on the bed. I stared at the ceiling. I didn't sleep. I planned. I went through the menu for tomorrow morning in my head. Eggs, bacon, sausages, grits, biscuits, and a side of justice. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was a feeble old man cowering in his room. They were about to find out that the kitchen was closed, and the butcher was in. I closed my eyes and waited for the sun. The silence in the house at 4 a.m. was heavy. It was the kind of silence that usually comes before a storm or after a funeral. My cheek throbbed with a dull rhythmic ache where my daughter's hand had connected with my face the night before. I walked into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The bruise was blooming, turning a sickly shade of purple and yellow against my dark skin. It looked like a map of my failure as a father. I touched it gently. The skin was hot. Most men would be raging. Most men would be packing their bags or throwing their children out onto the street in the middle of the night. But I am not most men. I am a chef. And a chef knows that you do not serve a dish until it is fully cooked. If you pull it out of the oven too early, it collapses. If you rush the reduction, it tastes bitter. Revenge, like a good gumbo, takes time. It takes heat, and it takes the right ingredients. I washed my face with cold water. I shaved carefully, navigating the razor around the swollen skin. I put on my best chef's coat, the white one, with my name embroidered in gold thread on the chest, Thaddeus Coleman. It was a uniform I hadn't worn in 5 years since I sold the restaurant. It felt tight across the shoulders, but it felt right. It felt like armor. I walked downstairs to the kitchen, the scene of the crime. My glasses were still on the floor where they had fallen. One lens was cracked, a spider web of glass catching the moonlight. I picked them up and put them in my pocket. Evidence. I turned on the lights. The stainless steel appliances gleamed. I ran my hand over the butcher block island. This was my domain. This was where I was a king, not a feeble old man to be slapped and silenced. I opened the refrigerator. I took out the ribs I had been marinating for 2 days. They were prime cuts, heavy with meat smelling of garlic and brown sugar. I took out the carton of eggs, the thick-cut bacon, the heavy cream, the stone ground grits I had ordered specially from South Carolina. I was going to cook. I wasn't cooking because I was sorry. I wasn't cooking because I was afraid. I was cooking because food is a language, and today I was going to speak a dialect they had never heard before. I lit the burners on the stove. The blue flame hissed to life. I put the heavy cast iron skillets on the heat. I listened to the metal expand. I started with the bacon. I laid the strips out in the pan, watching the fat render, watching it turn from white to translucent to gold. The smell began to rise. It was a primal smell. Salt and smoke. It was the smell of comfort. It was the smell of a home where everything was all right, but everything was not all right. I moved with the efficiency of muscle memory. My hands, the hands my daughter thought were weak chopped onions and peppers, with a speed that would have terrified her if she had been watching. The knife hit the cutting board with a rapid staccato rhythm. Chop, chop, chop. It sounded like a drum beat. It sounded like war. I started the grits. I whisked in the butter and the cream, watching them thicken, bubbling like lava. I seasoned them with salt and pepper, tasting them with a clean spoon. Perfect. Beatrice used to say my grits could heal a broken leg. Today they were just bait. I put the biscuits in the oven. I made them from scratch the way my grandmother taught me. Cold butter, white lily flour, a light touch. You cannot manhandle biscuit dough or it gets tough. You have to be gentle, unlike my daughter. The kitchen began to warm up. The aromas layered on top of each other, creating a symphony of scents. Coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, the sweet tang of the glaze on the ribs. It was sensory overload. It was designed to penetrate the floorboards and drift upstairs to the master bedroom where the usurpers were sleeping. I worked in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't hum. I just focused. I thought about Vanessa. I thought about the little girl who used to sit on this very counter swinging her legs, waiting for me to give her a taste of frosting. I thought about the woman who had looked at me with such hatred last night. She thought she had won. She thought the slap was the end of the argument. She thought that by using violence she had established a new hierarchy. She thought I was down here cowering, trying to figure out how to apologize, trying to figure out how to buy my way back into her good graces. She didn't know I was sharpening the knives. Upstairs, I heard a floorboard creak. It was 7 o'clock. The smell had done its work. The rats were waking up. I heard the murmur of voices. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the tone. It was sleepy, satisfied. I imagined them lying there in my guest bed, the bed Beatrice had picked out. "Do you smell that?" I imagined Brad saying. Bacon, Vanessa would say. Real bacon. I heard footsteps. Heavy, clumsy footsteps. That was Brad. Then lighter, sharper steps. Vanessa. I cracked the eggs into a bowl. 6, 8, 10. I whisked them furiously. I heard them on the landing. They were whispering. "See?" Brad Vanessa's voice drifted down the stairs. "I told you. He is making breakfast." Brad laughed, a low, gloating sound. "You were right, babe. You scared him straight. He knows who is boss now." "Exactly," Vanessa said. "He is trying to apologize. This is his peace offering. He knows if he doesn't make us happy, we will put him in that home. He is terrified." I stopped whisking. I stared at the yellow mixture in the bowl. Terrified. They thought I was terrified. I poured the eggs into the hot skillet. They sizzled loudly, a violent hiss. I didn't look up when they walked into the kitchen. I kept my eyes on the eggs, pushing them gently with a spatula, creating soft, fluffy curds. "Morning, Dad," Vanessa said. Her voice was bright, cheery. It was as if last night had never happened, as if she hadn't assaulted me, as if she hadn't threatened to steal my life. She walked over to the coffee pot. She poured herself a mug. She took a deep breath, inhaling the steam. "Wow," she said, "you really went all out. Ribs for breakfast. Is this a special occasion?" I didn't answer. I just plated the eggs. Brad walked in, scratching his stomach. He was wearing his boxers and a t-shirt, in my kitchen. He looked at the spread on the counter, the stack of golden pancakes, the mountain of bacon, the bowl of creamy grits. "Damn, Thad," he said, grabbing a piece of bacon with his bare hand. "You trying to fatten us up before the crypto launch?" He laughed at his own joke. Grease shone on his chin. I turned around slowly. I held the skillet in my hand. It was heavy iron, hot enough to burn through skin. I placed it on the trivet with a heavy thud. "Sit down," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when a line cook was messing up an order during the dinner rush. It was quiet, but it carried weight. They sat. They sat at the table I had set. I had set 6 places. Vanessa looked at the empty chairs. "Why so many plates, Dad?" she asked, taking a bite of a biscuit. "Are you expecting ghosts?" She laughed. She thought she was funny. She thought she was untouchable. I picked up the coffee pot. I walked around the table, filling their cups. I moved behind Vanessa. I stood there for a second, just behind her chair. I looked at the back of her neck. I thought about how easy it would be to pour the scalding liquid. But that was what she would do. That was the brute force way. I was an artist. I poured the coffee into her cup. Not a drop spilled. "I am expecting guests," I said. "Guests?" Brad asked, his mouth full of eggs. "Who?" "The neighbors." "We don't want to talk to the neighbors, Thad. We have business to discuss. The house sale." "We will discuss the house," I said, walking back to the stove. "We will discuss everything." Vanessa looked at Brad and winked. I saw it. It was a conspiratorial wink. A wink that said, "We got him. He is compliant." "Dad," she said, wiping crumbs from her lip, "I am glad you came to your senses. Last night, things got a little heated. But I think it was necessary. Sometimes you have to break a bone to reset it straight right. She was justifying hitting me. She was turning her abuse into a medical procedure. I plated the ribs. They were dark, sticky, glistening with sauce. I put them in the center of the table. "You are right, Vanessa," I said. "Sometimes you have to break something to fix it." She smiled. "See, Brad? He gets it. He finally gets it. So about the papers. I have them in my bag. After we eat, we can sign them. And then Brad and I can get to work on the listing. We can probably have this place sold by next month." I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7:55. 5 minutes. They ate like starving wolves. They didn't taste the food. They just consumed it. They shoveled it in, fueling their greed. I didn't eat. I stood by the counter, wiping my hands on a towel. I watched them. I watched my daughter. I looked for any sign of remorse, any sign of hesitation. There was none. She was radiant with victory. She was eating my food, drinking my coffee, sitting in my house, planning my demise, and she felt absolutely justified. She truly believed I was a burden. She truly believed she deserved my legacy more than I did. It was a level of entitlement that was almost impressive in its purity. Brad belched, loudly. "Great grub, Thad," he said. "You still got the touch. Maybe when we move you to the condo, you can cook for the other old folks. Make a little pocket money." He chuckled. I folded the towel. I placed it on the counter. I checked my watch. 7:59. They were scraping their plates. They were happy. They were full. They felt secure. This was the moment of maximum vulnerability. When the belly is full, the brain gets slow. The kitchen was silent now, save for the low hum of the refrigerator and the settling of the old house. The food was ready. The ribs were resting under a tent of foil, their heat radiating outward. The eggs were fluffy and yellow, waiting in the warming drawer. The grits were thick and creamy, a pool of white gold. But the food was only half the presentation. In the restaurant business, we have a saying: people eat with their eyes first. If the table does not look right, the food will never taste right. And this morning the table had to be perfect. I walked to the sideboard in the dining room. It was a heavy piece of mahogany that I had restored myself sanding down years of scratches and varnishing it until it glowed like amber. I opened the bottom drawer. It stuck a little the way it always did in the humidity, but with a gentle tug it slid open. Inside sat a wooden box lined with tarnish-resistant felt. I ran my hand over the lid. This box was older than I was. It belonged to Beatrice's grandmother. Inside was the family silver. Not the stainless steel we used for everyday meals. This was real sterling silver, heavy and cool to the touch. The handles were engraved with a delicate floral pattern that had been worn smooth by 100 years of thumbprints. I picked up a fork. It had a weight to it, a substance. It felt like a tool, not a toy. I remembered the last time I saw this box. It was 2 years ago. I had come home early from the market and found Vanessa in the hallway. She was carrying a large tote bag, and she looked nervous. She said she was just borrowing some books, but when she left I watched her walk to her car. She struggled with the weight of the bag. Books are heavy, but silver is heavier. I had followed her out. I asked to see the books. She refused. She got angry. She said I was controlling. But I reached into the car window and pulled the bag open. Underneath a layer of old magazines was this wooden box. She had tried to steal her mother's legacy to pay off a credit card bill. I didn't call the police then. I didn't even yell. I just took the box back into the house and locked the door. We never spoke about it. We just added it to the pile of silent resentments that built a wall between us. Today I was bringing it out. I carried the box to the table. I laid out the settings. Fork on the left, knife and spoon on the right, blade facing in. I measured the distance from the edge of the table with my thumb just like I taught my waitstaff. 1 inch. Precision. I set 6 places. 1 for me at the head of the table, 1 for Vanessa to my right, 1 for Brad to my left, and 3 more. 3 empty chairs waiting for the guests of honor. I placed the linen napkins. I folded them into crisp standing triangles. I polished the water glasses until they sparkled. I placed the crystal pitcher of orange juice in the center of the table next to the platter of ribs. It looked like a photo from a magazine. It looked like a celebration. It looked like a trap. I heard them moving upstairs. The heavy thud of Brad's feet, the click of the bathroom door. They were getting ready. They were probably smiling at themselves in the mirror, thinking about how easy it had been. 1 slap, that was all it took. 1 show of force, and the old man crumbled. They were probably calculating their commission on the house sale right now. I went back to the kitchen and poured the coffee. It was a dark roast imported from Ethiopia. Expensive, complex. It smelled like earth and chocolate. I put the pot on a silver tray along with the cream and sugar. I walked back into the dining room and stood by the window. I looked out at the driveway. It was empty. But they would be here soon. The guests, the men who would turn this breakfast into a courtroom. I checked my watch. 7:58. Right on cue, I heard the footsteps on the stairs. They were coming down. I turned to face the door. I clasped my hands behind my back. I stood tall. My cheek still throbbed, but the pain was distant now. It was just fuel. Vanessa walked in first. She was wearing a yellow sundress that looked bright and cheerful. She had put on makeup trying to cover the darkness under her eyes, but she couldn't cover the hardness in them. She stopped when she saw the table. Her eyes went wide. She looked at the silver. She looked at the crystal. She looked at the mountain of food. Wow, she breathed. Brad came up behind her. He was wearing a polo shirt and khakis, trying to look like a respectable businessman instead of a man who spent his days losing money on the internet. He whistled low and long. "Look at this spread," he said, rubbing his hands together. "Thad, you really outdid yourself. This looks like a 5-star hotel." I pulled out the chair for Vanessa. "Please," I said, my voice smooth as gravy. "Sit down." She sat. She ran her hand over the tablecloth. She picked up the heavy silver fork. She recognized it. I saw her pause. I saw the memory of the theft flicker in her eyes, but she pushed it away. She told herself it didn't matter. Everything in this house would be hers soon anyway. Brad sat down across from her. He reached for the ribs immediately without waiting for grace, without waiting for me to sit. He grabbed a bone and tore into the meat grease coating his lips. "Oh my God," he moaned with his mouth full. "These are amazing. You still got it, Thad. I have to hand it to you. You know your way around a pig." I walked to the head of the table. I didn't sit. I poured coffee into Vanessa's cup. I poured coffee into Brad's cup. Vanessa took a sip. She sighed contentedly. "This is perfect, Dad," she said, looking up at me with a smile that was almost genuine. Almost. "This is exactly what we needed, a fresh start." She reached into her purse, which was hanging on the back of her chair. She pulled out a thick manila envelope. She placed it on the table next to her plate, moving the silver knife aside to make room. "I have the papers right here," she said, patting the envelope. "The realtor sent them over late last night. It is a standard exclusive right-to-sell agreement and the power of attorney forms. Just so we can handle the heavy lifting for you. You won't have to worry about a thing. We will deal with the inspections, the offers, the closing. You can just relax." I looked at the envelope. It was thick. It was heavy. It was a death warrant for my independence. "We can sign right after we eat," she said, picking up a biscuit and buttering it. "Or even while we eat. No rush. But the sooner we get it done, the sooner we can get you into that condo. It has a pool, Dad. You like swimming, right? I hate swimming. I sink like a stone." But I nodded slowly. "A pool sounds nice," I said. "See," Brad said, pointing a rib bone at me. "I told you he would come around. He just needed a little push. A little reality check." He laughed. A wet, arrogant sound. "Yeah," Vanessa said, chewing. "You know, Dad, last night, I am sorry I lost my temper. But you have to understand, we are under a lot of pressure. And when you are stubborn, it is frustrating. We are trying to help you, and sometimes helping someone means making hard decisions for them." She believed it. That was the scary part. She had twisted the narrative in her head until she was the hero. She wasn't a daughter who hit her father. She was a caretaker dealing with a difficult patient. I looked at the 3 empty chairs at the end of the table. Vanessa noticed my gaze. She frowned slightly. "Dad," she asked, pausing with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Why are there so many places set?" Brad looked up, wiping grease from his chin. "Yeah, I was wondering that too. You expecting the choir?" I smiled. It was a small, tight smile. "I told you I said I invited guests." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "I thought you were joking. Who did you invite, Dad?" "The neighbors. Mrs. Gable from next door." "We don't want Mrs. Gable here. We have business to discuss. This is a family meeting." "It is a family meeting," I agreed, "but it is also a business meeting. And you cannot have a business meeting without all the stakeholders." Brad snorted. "Stakeholders. Thad, the only stakeholder here is the guy eating the steak." He laughed at his own joke again. "You should eat, Dad," Vanessa said, dismissing my comment. "The food is getting cold, and we have a lot of paperwork to get through." I didn't move. I stood at the head of the table, my hands resting on the back of my chair. I looked at the clock on the wall. 8 o'clock sharp. Just then, a car door slammed outside, then another. Vanessa froze. She looked toward the window. Is that a car?" she asked. "2 cars," I said. She stood up halfway. "Who is it, Dad?" "If it is the realtor, I told him not to come until 10. We need time to review the doorbell rang. It wasn't a hesitant ring. It was a firm, authoritative press. Ding dong. The sound echoed through the house. Brad stopped chewing. He looked at the door. He looked nervous. People like Brad, who owe money to half the town, always look nervous when the doorbell rings. "Who is that?" he asked, his voice dropping. I walked past them. I walked toward the hallway. "Sit down," I said over my shoulder. "Keep eating. You are going to need your strength, Dad." Vanessa called out, her voice sharp with panic. "Dad, Don't open that door. If it is a salesman, just tell him to go away. If it is the neighbors, tell them we are busy. I reached the front door. I put my hand on the brass knob. I felt the cold metal. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment the trap snapped shut, I turned the lock. I pulled the door open. The morning sun flooded into the hallway, blindingly bright. 3 men stood on my porch. They were silhouetted against the light like avenging angels. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said. "Good morning, Mr. Coleman," the man in the front said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and familiar. "We are right on time." "Please," I said, stepping aside. "Come in. Breakfast is served." I led them down the hallway. I heard their heavy footsteps on the hardwood floor. Thud, thud, thud. It sounded like the March of Doom. We walked into the dining room. Vanessa was standing up now, clutching her napkin. Brad was wiping his mouth frantically. They looked at the men who walked in. The first man was Reginald Baxter. He was 6'2", wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Brad's car. He was carrying a thick leather briefcase. He had been my lawyer for 30 years, but Vanessa had never met him because I kept my business separate from my family. He looked like a man who ate sharks for lunch. The second man was Sheriff Miller. He was in full uniform, his hat in his hand, his badge gleaming silver on his chest. His gun belt creaked as he walked. He had a face like carved granite. The third man was someone even I hadn't seen in years, but I recognized him instantly. It was the district attorney, a man named Harrison, who had just been elected on a platform of cleaning up the city. Vanessa's face went the color of the white linen tablecloth. She dropped her napkin. Brad stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward and crashed onto the floor. Who are you?" he stammered. I walked to the head of the table. I gestured to the empty chairs. "Please sit down, gentlemen," I said. They sat. Reginald took the chair next to Vanessa. Miller took the chair next to Brad. The district attorney took the end. Vanessa looked at me. Her eyes were wide, terrified. She looked like a child who had just realized the monster under the bed was real. "Dad," she whispered, "what is this? Who are these people?" I smiled. "I told you, Vanessa," I said, picking up the platter of ribs. "I invited guests. I placed a rib on Reginald's plate. I placed a scoop of grits on the sheriff's plate. These are my friends," I said, "and they are very hungry." But they weren't hungry for food. They were hungry for the truth. I looked at Brad. He was shaking. He was looking at the sheriff's gun. "Eat up, Brad," I said. "You said the food was amazing. Don't let it go to waste." I poured coffee for the sheriff. "Sheriff Miller," I said, "before you start eating, I would like to make a report." The sheriff looked up at me. He didn't smile. "Go ahead, Mr. Coleman," he said, taking a notebook out of his pocket. "I am listening." I pointed at my cheek. The bruise was purple and ugly in the morning light. "I would like to report an assault," I said. "Domestic battery. And attempted extortion." The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Vanessa let out a small, strangled sound. "Dad," she squeaked. "Dad, no." I looked her right in the eye. "Yes, daughter," I said. "Yes." The morning sun that flooded through the open door did not bring warmth, it brought judgment. The 3 men standing on my porch were not there for a social call, and they were certainly not there to admire my biscuits. They were the heavy artillery of the legal system, and I had summoned them to my breakfast table. Vanessa stood frozen near the sideboard, her hand still clutching the linen napkin. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her makeup looking stark and artificial against her pale skin. She looked from me to the men and back again, her mind trying to process a reality that refused to fit into her narrow worldview. To her, I was a confused old man who needed to be managed. To these men, I was Thaddeus Coleman, a pillar of the community, and a man you did not cross. Brad scrambled up from the floor where his chair had tipped over. He wiped his greasy hands on his pants, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped rat looking for a sewer grate. He saw the badge on Sheriff Miller's chest. He saw the gun on his hip. He saw the expensive suit on Reginald Baxter. He didn't know who the third man was, but the way District Attorney Harrison carried himself told Brad everything he needed to know. This was not a friendly visit. "Please come in, gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and welcoming. "The coffee is hot and the ribs are resting." Reginald stepped in first. He walked with the heavy, confident stride of a man who charged $500 an hour just to think about a case. He nodded at me a small, tight acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation. He didn't look at Vanessa. He looked through her as if she were a piece of furniture that was about to be repossessed. Sheriff Miller followed him. He took off his hat, holding it against his chest. He was a big man, solid as an oak tree. We had fished together for 20 years. I had cooked for his daughter's wedding. He looked at my swollen cheek, and his jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his neck. He didn't say a word, but the look in his eyes was a promise. District Attorney Harrison brought up the rear. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the world, shutting us in. He looked around the dining room, taking in the opulent spread, the silver, the crystal, and the terror on my daughter's face. He looked like a man who was about to enjoy a very interesting meal. I gestured to the table. "Please sit," I said. They moved to the empty chairs. Reginald sat next to Vanessa. She flinched as he pulled out his chair, the smell of his expensive cologne and old leather briefcase washing over her. Miller sat next to Brad. The sheriff was broad-shouldered and he took up a lot of space. Brad had to lean away to avoid touching him, shrinking into himself. Harrison took the head of the table opposite me. The silence was absolute. It was thick, heavy, and suffocating. The only sound was the clinking of silverware as I moved around the table pouring coffee. Vanessa finally found her voice. It was high and thin, like a wire being pulled until it snapped. "Dad," she whispered. "Dad, what is this? Who are these people? Why are there police in our house?" I didn't answer her immediately. I finished pouring the coffee. I placed the silver pot back on the tray. I walked to the head of the table and stood behind my chair. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had slapped me 12 hours ago. The woman who had plotted to sell my home. "These aren't just people, Vanessa," I said. "This is the guest list." I pointed to Reginald. "This is Reginald Baxter," I said. "He has been my personal attorney for 30 years. He handles the business trust. He handles the real estate portfolio. And he handles my will." Vanessa blinked, her mouth opened slightly. Your attorney," she stammered. "But you don't have an attorney. You use the legal aid clinic downtown." I smiled. It was a cold smile. "That is what I let you believe I said. Because a wise man keeps his counsel. Reginald handles the assets you don't know about." I pointed to Miller. "And this is Sheriff Miller. I believe you know who he is. He is the man who keeps the peace in this county. And he is the man who arrests people who break the law." Brad made a small whimpering sound. He was staring at the handcuffs on Miller's belt. "And this," I said, pointing to the man at the end of the table, "is Mr. Harrison, the district attorney. He decides who goes to jail and for how long." Vanessa looked at me. Her eyes were wide with shock, but underneath the shock I saw the anger returning, the entitlement. She couldn't believe that I, the old man she controlled, had done this. "Dad, this is ridiculous," she hissed, her voice gaining a little strength. "Send them away. We have family business to discuss. We have the realtor coming. We don't have time for your poker buddies." Reginald cleared his throat. It was a dry, authoritative sound. "Mrs. Coleman," he said, his voice deep and smooth, "we are not here for poker, and I assure you there will be no realtor coming today. Or any day." Vanessa turned on him. "Excuse me. This is my father's house. I am his daughter. I handle his affairs. You have no right to be here." Reginald opened his briefcase. He pulled out a file. "Actually, Mrs. Coleman, I have every right. As the executor of the Coleman estate and the legal representative of Mr. Thaddeus Coleman, I am here to oversee a transition of power." "Transition of power," Brad squeaked. "What does that mean?" "It means I ignored them. I wasn't done serving breakfast. I walked over to the buffet. I picked up the platter of ribs. The meat was falling off the bone, the glaze glistening under the chandelier lights. I walked around the table serving my guests. I put a massive rib on Reginald's plate. "Eat up, Reginald," I said. "You're going to need your energy. It is going to be a long morning." I served the sheriff. I gave him a double portion of grits. "Sheriff, I know you like them cheesy," I said. "Thank you, Thad," Miller said, his voice rumbling. "They look delicious." I served the district attorney. I didn't serve Vanessa. I didn't serve Brad. Their plates remained empty, pristine white circles on the tablecloth. Vanessa watched me serve them. Her face turned red. "Dad, stop this," she snapped. "Stop acting like a servant. It is embarrassing. Tell them to leave. We need to sign the papers." I walked back to my chair. I didn't sit. I gripped the back of the chair with my hands. I looked at Brad. He was sweating. Sweat was dripping down his forehead, staining his collar. He looked like he was about to vomit. "You hungry, Brad?" I asked. He nodded quickly, unable to speak. That is too bad, I said, because this food is for friends, and you are not my friend. Brad looked at Vanessa. Do something, he whispered. He has lost his mind. Vanessa stood up. She slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Enough, she screamed. Enough of this charade. I don't know who you paid to come here, Dad. I don't know what game you are playing, but it ends now. I am calling Dr. Thorne. I am having you committed today. Right now. You are clearly having a breakdown. She reached for her phone. Sheriff Miller didn't move fast. He didn't have to. He just turned his head and looked at her. I wouldn't do that if I were you, ma'am, Miller said. Vanessa froze. Excuse me? If you make that call, Miller said calmly, taking a sip of coffee, you will be adding conspiracy to commit fraud to the list of charges, and Dr. Thorne is already under investigation. If you call him, you are just giving us the link we need. Charges, Vanessa whispered. Her hand dropped to her side. What charges? I looked at her. This was the moment the trap snapped shut. I reached for the platter of eggs. I scooped a large serving onto my own plate. I picked up a biscuit. I buttered it slowly, deliberately. Then I looked at the sheriff. Sheriff Miller, I said, my voice ringing clear in the silent room. Before I eat this meal, I would like to make an official report. I pointed to my face, to the bruise that was purple and ugly in the morning light. I want to report an assault, I said. Vanessa gasped. She took a step back, knocking into her chair. Dad, no, she said. Domestic battery, I continued, my eyes locked on hers. And elder abuse and attempted extortion. The words hung in the air like smoke. Brad let out a moan. Oh, God, she hit him. I told her not to. Shut up, Brad, Vanessa shrieked, spinning on him. Shut up, you idiot. She turned back to me. Her eyes were wild. You can't do this, she said. I am your daughter. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. You provoked me. You were being difficult. Reginald opened his file. He pulled out a pen. Provocation is not a legal defense for assault. Mrs. Coleman, he said, writing something down, and given the financial coercion involved, we are looking at a hate crime enhancement. Targeting a vulnerable senior citizen for financial gain is a felony in this state. And since you crossed state lines to access his bank accounts, well, that brings in the feds. Feds, Brad whispered. He looked like he was going to faint. Vanessa looked at the three men. She looked at the badges, the suits, the briefcases. She realized then that this wasn't a game. This wasn't a bluff. These weren't actors. She looked at me. Her father. The man she thought was weak. Dad, please, she begged, her voice trembling. Don't do this. You are ruining my life. I ruined nothing, I said calmly. I cooked breakfast. You are the one who ordered the side of justice. I sat down. I picked up my fork. I looked at the sheriff. She hit me, Miller, I said. Last night, in my kitchen. She demanded I sign over the deed to my house. When I refused, she struck me, closed fist, knocked my glasses off. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the broken glasses. I placed them on the table next to the butter dish. Here's the evidence, I said. Miller picked up the glasses. He looked at the cracked lens. He looked at Vanessa. Ma'am, he said, standing up slowly. His chair scraped against the floor. Vanessa backed away until she hit the wall. No, this is a lie. He fell. He is old. He falls all the time. He is making it up. Brad, tell them. Tell them he fell. Brad looked at the sheriff. He looked at the gun. He looked at Vanessa. He swallowed. I didn't see anything, he stammered. I was in the bathroom. Vanessa stared at him. Her mouth fell open. You coward, she screamed. You lying coward. You were standing right there. You laughed. So you admit you hit him. Harrison, the DA, interjected, leaning forward, his eyes sharp. You admit you were there, and he didn't fall. Vanessa realized her mistake. She put her hands over her mouth. I didn't say that, she mumbled through her fingers. You just said Brad was there and laughed, Harrison said, which implies there was something to laugh at. An assault, perhaps? I cut into my ribs. The meat fell away from the bone, tender and juicy. I took a bite. It was delicious. I looked at Vanessa. Do you want a biscuit, honey? I asked. You look pale. She stared at me with pure hatred. I hate you, she hissed. I hate you so much. Good, I said, chewing. Use that. You are going to need that anger where you are going." "Where am I going?" she asked, her voice rising to a scream. Sheriff Miller walked around the table. He unclipped the handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked, a cold final sound. "Vanessa Coleman," he said, "you are under arrest." Vanessa screamed. She tried to run. She lunged for the back door, but Miller was faster. He grabbed her arm. He spun her around. Brad sat there shaking, crying silently into his napkin. I took another bite of my eggs. "This is good bacon," I said to Reginald. Reginald nodded, slicing his steak. "Excellent, Thad. Simply excellent." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the best music I had heard in years. But we weren't done yet. Not even close. Vanessa was just the first course. Brad was still sitting there. And he thought he was safe because he had lied. He thought he was safe because he hadn't thrown the punch. He didn't know about the blue folder in Reginald's briefcase, the folder with his name on it. I looked at him. "Save room for dessert, Brad," I said. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with terror. "Why?" he whispered. "Because," I said, wiping my mouth, "we haven't even gotten to the part about the money you stole from the company you claimed you worked for." Brad's face went gray. I smiled. "Pass the jelly, please." "He is lying," she screamed. The sound tore through the dining room, shattering the heavy silence like a dropped plate. Vanessa was backed against the wall, her chest heaving, her face flushed with a mixture of panic and rage. She pointed a trembling finger at me. Her nail polish was chipped. I noticed that small detail. She was always so perfect, so put together, but she was fraying at the edges. "He is senile," she shouted, looking frantically from the sheriff to the district attorney. "Can't you see it? Look at him. He is confused. He fell. He falls all the time. He has vertigo. He slipped in the kitchen last night while he was trying to cook. I tried to help him up. That is what happened. I tried to help him, and now he is twisting it. He is making up stories because he is angry that we want to sell the house. It is dementia. It has to be." She looked at Brad for support. Brad was still sitting at the table, staring into his coffee cup as if the answers to his life were written in the dregs. "Tell them, Brad," she pleaded. "Tell them he fell." "You heard it. You heard the thump." Brad looked up. He looked at the sheriff's gun. He looked at Vanessa. He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. "Yeah," he croaked, his voice weak. I heard a noise, like a fall. I was in the bathroom, but it sounded like he slipped." Sheriff Miller looked at me. His face was unreadable, but I knew him. I knew he wanted to believe me. We had spent too many mornings on the lake for him to think I was a liar. But the law is the law. It requires proof. It requires more than the word of an old man against a young couple. "That is a serious accusation," Mrs. Coleman Miller said, his voice low and even. "Filing a false police report is a crime. Accusing your father of perjury is a bold move. Are you absolutely certain that is your statement?" "I am certain," she yelled, her desperation rising. "He is old. He is sick. You can't arrest me based on the delusions of a geriatric man who probably forgot to take his pills. This is harassment. I will sue the department. I will sue all of you." I stood there at the head of the table. I felt a strange calmness settle over me. It was the calm of the kitchen in the middle of a dinner rush. The chaos was swirling around me, but I was the eye of the storm. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the woman I had bounced on my knee, the woman I had taught to ride a bike, the woman who was now standing there calling me crazy to save her own skin. It broke my heart, but it also steeled my resolve. I walked slowly over to the china cabinet in the corner of the room. It was a tall, glass-fronted piece filled with Beatrice's collection of porcelain figurines and antique teapots. But on the top shelf, sitting between a crystal vase and a silver gravy boat, was something that didn't belong. It was a teddy bear. He was old. His fur was matted and worn off in patches. One of his ears was hanging by a thread. He wore a little blue ribbon around his neck that had faded to gray. His name was Mr. Barnaby. I had bought him for Vanessa at a carnival when she was 6 years old. She had won a goldfish that died before we got to the car, so I bought the bear to stop her crying. She had slept with that bear every night until she was 12. She had cried into his fur. She had told him her secrets. I reached up and took the bear down. He felt light in my hands. Dusty. Vanessa stopped shouting. She watched me. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "Put that down. That is mine." I turned to face the room, holding the bear in front of me like an offering. "Do you remember Mr. Barnaby, Vanessa?" I asked, my voice soft. "Of course I do," she spat. "It is my bear. Why do you have it? You left him here," I said. "When you moved out. You said he was childish. You said you didn't want clutter in your new apartment." Beatrice kept him. She put him on the shelf. She said he was watching over the house. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh God, here we go." The sentimental speech. "Is this supposed to make me cry, Dad? Is this supposed to make me confess because I miss my teddy bear? Grow up." I looked at the bear's face. He had 2 black button eyes. One of them was scratched. The other one was brand new. It was shiny. It caught the light from the chandelier. Beatrice was right, I said. He was watching. I turned the bear around. I opened the Velcro seam in his back where the stuffing used to be. I reached inside. My fingers brushed against the cool metal of a battery pack. I pulled out a small black memory card. "What is that?" Brad asked, leaning forward. "Technology," I said. I walked over to the sideboard. I had set up a small projector there earlier that morning, hidden behind a stack of cookbooks. I pointed it at the blank cream-colored wall opposite the table. I inserted the memory card into the slot. "You said I was senile, Vanessa," I said, connecting the power cord. "You said I was paranoid. You said I was imagining things." I picked up the remote control. "But paranoia is just a heightened state of awareness," I continued. "And when money started going missing from my wallet last month, when my loose change jar started getting lighter, when Beatrice's jewelry box looked like it had been moved, I decided to become aware." I pressed the power button. A square of light hit the wall. It was fuzzy at first, then it sharpened. It was a wide-angle shot of the kitchen. The resolution was high definition, 4K. Mr. Barnaby had a very good eye. Vanessa gasped. She took a step back, bumping into the wall. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't. That is illegal. That is entrapment. It is security," I said. "In my own home." I pressed play. The video on the wall showed the kitchen from yesterday evening. The timestamp in the corner read 6:14 p.m. The audio was crisp. On the screen, Brad was sitting at the table picking his teeth. Vanessa walked in, throwing the folder onto the placemat. "We need to talk about the house," she said on the video. The real Vanessa in the dining room made a sound like a wounded animal. "Turn it off!" she shrieked. "Turn it off right now!" Sheriff Miller stood up. He put a hand on his belt. "Sit down, Mrs. Coleman," he ordered, his voice cutting through her panic. "Let us watch the movie." We watched. We watched the argument unfold. We heard every word, every insult. "He is useless, Vanessa. He is a leech." We heard Brad call me a burger flipper. We heard Vanessa call me a hoarder. Reginald Baxter, the lawyer, shook his head slowly. He took a sip of coffee, his eyes never leaving the screen. The district attorney leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, analyzing the evidence like he was already in court. Then came the moment. On the screen, I said, "The answer is no." And then Vanessa swung. The camera caught it perfectly. The wind up, the strike, the impact. The sound of the slap was loud, amplified by the speakers I had hidden in the room. It sounded wet and violent. My head snapped back on the screen. My glasses flew. The room was silent. Everyone was watching the violence play out in high definition. Then came the laughter. On the screen, Brad chuckled. Finally, someone had to knock some sense into him. In the dining room, the real Brad slid down in his chair, trying to make himself invisible. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at the floor. He looked anywhere but at the screen where his own cruelty was being broadcast. The video continued. Vanessa on the screen was ranting. "Or else we will have you declared incompetent. We will put you in a home." I paused the video on a freeze frame of Vanessa's face. She looked ugly, not physically, but spiritually. Her mouth was twisted in a sneer. Her eyes were cold. It was the face of a woman who had forgotten what love was. I put the remote down on the table. I looked at Vanessa. She was trembling. Her hands were over her mouth. Tears were streaming down her face now, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of terror. She knew. She knew there was no talking her way out of this. There was no gaslighting the camera. Mr. Barnaby had seen everything. I looked at Sheriff Miller. "Is that enough evidence, Sheriff?" I asked. "Or do I need to show you the clip from last week where Brad went through my wallet while I was in the bathroom?" Miller stood up. He put his coffee cup down. He adjusted his belt. "That is plenty, Mr. Coleman," he said. "That is assault, battery, conspiracy. And based on the threats about the nursing home, I would say we are looking at kidnapping charges too, if they had gone through with it." Harrison, the DA, stood up as well. He picked up a napkin and wiped his mouth. "Excellent ribs, Thad," he said. "And an excellent case. The state accepts the charges." Vanessa slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. She looked small. She looked broken. "Dad," she whispered. "Dad, please. Delete it. Just delete it. We can start over. I will change. I promise. I was stressed. The crypto, the debts, it made me crazy. I walked over to her. I stood over her just like she had stood over me in the kitchen. I looked down. I saw the little girl who used to cry when her goldfish died. I saw the teenager who wanted a car. I saw the woman who slapped me. You broke the contract, Vanessa. I said, my voice heavy with sadness. The unwritten contract between a parent and a child. I feed you, I clothe you, I love you, and in return you treat me with dignity. You broke it, and you can't fix a broken plate with apologies. The cracks always show. She reached out for my leg. I stepped back. Don't touch me, I said. I turned to Miller. She is all yours, Sheriff. Miller walked over. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked. Vanessa Coleman, stand up, he said. Put your hands behind your back. She didn't stand. She couldn't. Miller had to pull her up. She was dead weight, sobbing hysterically now, begging, screaming names. Brad tried to stand up. He tried to edge toward the back door. I wouldn't do that, son, Miller said without looking at him. My deputy is at the back door, and he isn't as nice as I am. Brad froze. He looked at me. Thad, he said, his voice shaking. I didn't hit you. You saw the video. I didn't touch you. No, I said, you didn't. You just laughed. You just watched. You encouraged it. That makes you an accomplice, Brad. And in my kitchen, the sous chef goes down with the head chef. Reginald opened his briefcase. He pulled out a document. Mr. Bradley Turner, he said, reading from the paper. In light of the video evidence and the hostile environment created in this home, I am serving you with an immediate eviction notice. You are not a tenant. You are a guest. And your invitation has been revoked. Eviction, Brad stammered. But my stuff. My computer, my crypto wallets. You have 5 minutes, Reginald said, checking his Rolex. Whatever you can carry in a trash bag is yours. Everything else stays until the police clear the scene. I walked to the kitchen. I pulled a box of heavy-duty trash bags from under the sink. I walked back and threw one at Brad. Start packing, I said. Vanessa was being led out the front door. She was screaming, Daddy, Daddy, help me. Don't let them take me. I watched her go. I watched my daughter, the person I loved more than anything in the world, get put into the back of a squad car. It hurt. It hurt like a knife in the gut. I wanted to run out there. I wanted to tell Miller to let her go. I wanted to fix it. But I couldn't. If I fixed this, she would never learn. If I saved her now, she would just come back harder, meaner. She needed to hit the bottom. She needed to feel the concrete. The door closed. The sirens didn't wail. They just flashed blue and red, reflecting off the walls of my dining room. I turned back to the table. The ribs were cold. The grits had congealed. The breakfast was ruined. But the house was quiet. Brad was scrambling upstairs, tripping over his own feet to get his things. I looked at Reginald. I looked at Harrison. I am sorry about the meal, gentlemen, I said. It seems the entertainment was a bit more disruptive than I planned. Harrison smiled a grim, tight smile. Don't apologize, Thad, he said. Justice is a dish best served cold. But those biscuits were still warm. And they were damn good. I sat down in my chair. I picked up my coffee cup. My hand was shaking a little. I looked at the teddy bear on the table. Mr. Barnaby. One eye glass, one eye plastic. Good boy, I whispered to the bear. Good boy. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter, but it was strong, just like me. Sheriff Miller placed his coffee cup back on the saucer with a delicate clink that sounded like a hammer striking an anvil in the sudden silence of the dining room. He did not rush. A man who has worn the badge for 30 years does not rush. He picked up the linen napkin I had folded so perfectly that morning. He wiped the corner of his mouth, removing a crumb of biscuit. He folded the napkin and placed it next to his plate. Then he stood up. The leather of his gun belt creaked. The floorboards groaned under his weight. He looked at Vanessa. He did not look at her like a family friend anymore. He looked at her like a suspect. That is enough, he said, his voice low and rumbling, filling the space between the crystal chandelier and the Persian rug. Vanessa was panting her back against the wall, her eyes darting between the screen where her crime was frozen in high definition and the badge on Miller's chest. She tried to speak, but only a squeak came out. Miller walked around the table. He moved with a heavy, inevitable momentum. He stopped 3 feet from her. Vanessa Coleman, he said. You are under arrest." For what? She shrieked, finding her voice. Her face twisted into something ugly, something I did not recognize. "For yelling at my father. That is not a crime. Being angry is not a crime. For assault," Miller corrected her, calmly reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. "For domestic battery against a senior citizen. For elder abuse. And based on the threats recorded on that video, for attempted extortion." He pulled the cuffs free. The metal shined in the morning sun. Vanessa looked at the cuffs, then she looked at me. Her eyes changed. The fear vanished, replaced by a pure, blinding rage. The mask of the aggrieved daughter fell away completely, revealing the predator underneath. She realized the game was over. She realized the house, the money, the future she felt entitled to were evaporating like steam. "You did this," she screamed. She pushed off the wall. She didn't run away. She ran at me. She lunged across the dining room, her hands curled into claws, her teeth bared. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to finish what she started the night before. She wanted to silence the witness. "Dad, you ruined everything," she howled. I didn't move. I sat at the head of the table, my knife and fork in hand. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my arms to protect myself. I trusted the man with the badge. And I trusted the ribs. I cut a piece of meat from the bone. The glaze was sticky and dark, smelling of molasses and cayenne pepper. Miller moved faster than a man his size should be able to move. He stepped into her path. He didn't strike her. He caught her. He grabbed her wrist mid-air, twisting it behind her back in one smooth, practiced motion. Vanessa yelped in pain as her arm was forced up between her shoulder blades. Her momentum slammed her chest against the wall next to the china cabinet. The glass panes rattled. Mr. Barnaby, the teddy bear, watched from the table, his plastic eye gleaming. "Stop fighting," Miller barked, pushing her flush against the wallpaper. "Stop fighting, or I will add resisting arrest to the list. Get off me," she screamed, kicking backward, her heel connecting with Miller's shin. He didn't even grunt. "Let me go. He is lying. He doctored the video. He is the abuser. He is the one who is crazy." Miller snapped the first cuff onto her right wrist. Click. It was a sound of finality, a mechanical period at the end of a long, ugly sentence. He grabbed her other hand, forcing it back. Click. "You have the right to remain silent," Miller recited, his voice bored, almost weary. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "I am not silent," Vanessa yelled, thrashing against the wall, trying to shake him off. "I will never be silent. I want a lawyer. I want my phone. Brad, do something. Help me." I put the piece of rib in my mouth. I chewed slowly. The meat was tender, perfectly smoked. The spice hit the back of my throat, warming me. It was the best meal I had ever cooked because it tasted like vindication. I looked at Brad. Brad was standing near the kitchen doorway. He had watched his wife lunge at me. He had watched the sheriff slam her against the wall. He had watched the handcuffs go on. And he had done nothing. He was pale, shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. He looked at Vanessa, struggling in Miller's grip. Then he looked at the back door, the one leading to the garden, the one leading to the alley, the one leading to freedom. He made his choice. He didn't help his wife. He ran. He bolted for the kitchen, scrambling over the threshold, his expensive sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. He knocked a chair over in his haste. He didn't look back. He was abandoning ship, leaving the woman he claimed to love to drown alone. He reached the back door. He grabbed the handle. He turned it. He threw the door open, ready to sprint into the morning, ready to disappear. But the doorway was not empty. Standing on the back porch, arms crossed, wearing a beige deputy uniform, was Deputy Jones. He was young, fit, and looked like he had been hoping someone would try to run. "Going somewhere?" Mr. Turner Jones asked. Brad skidded to a halt, almost running chest first into the deputy. He backed up, stumbling over his own feet. I was just getting some air," Brad stammered, raising his hands. "It is hot in there. I have asthma. I need air." "Sit down," Jones said, pointing inside. "Go sit down next to the sheriff, or I will put you on the floor." Brad walked back into the dining room, walking backward, his eyes wide, his hands still raised in surrender. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing candy. He backed up until his legs hit a chair and he collapsed into it, putting his head in his hands and beginning to sob. Pathetic. I took another bite of my breakfast. The grits were cooling, but they were still creamy, rich with butter and heavy cream. I ate them with a spoon, ignoring the chaos swirling around me. Vanessa was still screaming. Miller was dragging her toward the front door. She dug her heels in, sliding the expensive rug across the floor. Dad, tell him to stop. She begged, switching tactics in a heartbeat. Dad, please. I am your daughter. You can't let them take me to jail. I am sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. I was stressed. Please, Dad. Look at me. I looked at her. I swallowed my food. I wiped my mouth with the linen napkin. I placed the napkin on the table next to my plate. I looked at the woman being hauled out of my house. Her hair was messy, her dress was twisted, her face was red and wet with tears and snot. I didn't see my daughter. I saw a stranger. I saw a thief. I saw a person who would have sold my home and thrown me into a facility without a second thought. You are right, Vanessa, I said, my voice calm, cutting through her screams. You are my daughter. And because I am your father, it is my job to teach you. Teach me what she cried, struggling against the cuffs. To teach you that actions have consequences, I said. You raised your hand against me. You raised your voice against me. You tried to take what wasn't yours. Now you are going to pay the bill. Miller pulled her through the doorway. No, she shrieked. No, no, no. Her voice faded as they moved down the hallway. I heard the front door open. I heard the chatter of the police radio outside. I heard the car door slam. Silence returned to the dining room, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the heavy, expectant silence of before. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannon fire stops. Brad was crying at the table, his shoulders shaking. Reginald Baxter picked up his coffee cup and took a sip, his face impassive. D.A. Harrison leaned back in his chair, looking at me with a mixture of respect and sadness. I am sorry you had to see that, Thad Harrison said, quietly. I shook my head. I picked up a biscuit. It was flaky golden brown. I split it open and steam rose from the soft white interior. Don't be sorry, Mr. District Attorney, I said, buttering the bread. It was necessary. Sometimes you have to cut the rod out to save the tree. I looked at Brad. He was looking at me through his fingers, his eyes red and puffy. Are you going to arrest me too? He whispered. I took a bite of the biscuit. It melted in my mouth. I looked at Reginald. Is he under arrest? Reginald? I asked. Reginald opened his briefcase. He pulled out a file. Not yet, he said. The sheriff only had a warrant for Vanessa based on the immediate evidence of assault. Brad here. He is just a witness. For now. Brad let out a breath, a sob of relief. Oh, thank God. Thank God. Thad, listen to me. I didn't touch you. You saw the video. I just stood there. I was scared of her too. She made me do it. He was already turning on her. The ink wasn't even dry on the arrest report, and he was already throwing his wife under the bus to save his own skin. I chewed slowly. I swallowed. You are not under arrest, Brad, I said. Not yet. But you are under something else. What he asked, wiping his nose on his sleeve. I pointed to Reginald. Show him Reginald. Reginald slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Brad's plate next to the pile of rib bones he had gnawed clean earlier. Brad picked it up. Picked. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. What is this? He asked. It is an eviction notice, Reginald said, his voice crisp and professional. Emergency order, granted by a judge at 6 a.m. this morning based on the threat of elder abuse and hostile environment. Eviction, Brad stammered. But we live here. My stuff is here. My computer, my mining rig. You are a guest here, Reginald corrected him. You pay no rent. You have no lease. You have no rights to this property. And as of this moment, your invitation has been revoked. Brad looked at me. Thad, you can't kick me out. Vanessa is in jail. I have nowhere to go. My parents live in Ohio. I don't have any money. I picked up my coffee cup. I looked him in the eye. You have feet, I said. What? He asked. You have feet, I repeated. Start walking. But my clothes, Brad cried. My shoes, my collection. I reached under the table. I pulled out a heavy-duty black trash bag. I tossed it at him. It hit him in the chest. You have 5 minutes, I said. Whatever you can fit in that bag, you keep. Whatever is left in this house at 8:45 belongs to me. And I am going to burn it. Brad stared at the bag. He stared at me. He saw the bruise on my face. He saw the cold, flat look in my eyes. He realized I wasn't the jolly chef anymore. I wasn't the father-in-law he could manipulate. I was the landlord, and rent was due. He scrambled up. He grabbed the bag. He ran for the stairs, tripping over his own feet. I listened to him thundering up the steps. I heard drawers being ripped open. I heard hangers clattering. He was panicked. He was desperate. I looked at Reginald. I looked at Harrison. "More coffee, gentlemen?" I asked. "Please," Harrison said, holding out his cup. "These ribs really are spectacular, Thad." We sat there eating breakfast, listening to the sounds of a man packing his life into a garbage bag upstairs. It was a strange soundtrack for a meal, but it fit the occasion. 5 minutes later, Brad came stumbling down the stairs. The bag was bulging over his shoulder. He was wearing 2 jackets, sweating profusely. He was carrying his laptop under one arm and a pair of sneakers tied together around his neck. He stopped in the dining room doorway. He looked at the table. He looked at the food he hadn't finished. "Thad," he said, Can I take a biscuit for the road?" I looked at him. The audacity, the sheer clueless greed. "No," I said. He flinched. "Get out, Brad," I said. He turned and ran. He ran out the front door, leaving it wide open. I watched him through the window, running down the driveway, dragging his trash bag, looking like a thief fleeing the scene of a crime. He didn't have a car. Vanessa had the keys to the SUV, and the police had taken those. He was on foot. I watched him disappear down the street. I stood up and walked to the front door. I closed it. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the chain into place. The house was quiet. Vanessa was gone. Brad was gone. I walked back to the dining room. I sat down. "So, Reginald," I said, spreading a little jam on my biscuit, "tell me about the bank accounts." Reginald smiled. He opened his file. "We froze them at midnight, Thad," he said. "But we found something interesting in Brad's transaction history. Something I think you should see." He handed me a document. I looked at it. It was a credit card statement. Vanessa's card. The one I paid off every month. But the charges weren't for groceries. They weren't for gas. They were for a hotel. The Starlight Motel on the edge of town. Every Tuesday afternoon for the last 6 months. And there were charges for dinners for 2. On nights when Brad told Vanessa he was working late, I looked at Reginald. "He has a girlfriend?" I asked. Reginald nodded. "A woman named Jessica, his secretary, and he has been paying for her apartment with your daughter's money." I put the paper down. I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "So he was stealing from the thief," I said. "It seems so," Reginald said. I picked up my coffee. "Well," I said, "when Vanessa calls from jail needing bail money, I think I know who she should ask." The breakfast was cold, but the justice was just starting to heat up. I took a sip. Delicious. The silence that settled over the dining room after the police cruiser pulled away was heavy and thick like the humid air before a thunderstorm breaks in the Delta. My daughter was gone. The sirens were fading into the distance, carrying away the woman I had raised, the woman who had struck me. Now only the residue remained, and that residue was named Brad. He was still sitting at my table, his chair pushed back slightly as if he wanted to run, but his legs refused to cooperate. He was shaking so hard the silverware on the table vibrated against the china, creating a tiny tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. He looked at the empty doorway where his wife had just been dragged out. Then he looked at the sheriff, then at the district attorney, and finally his eyes landed on me. He didn't look angry. He didn't look defensive. He looked like a dog that knows it has chewed up the wrong shoe and is waiting to see if it gets the newspaper or the boot. "Dad," he stammered, his voice cracking like a teenager. "Dad, please. You have to listen to me." I didn't answer him. I picked up my coffee cup. The porcelain was warm against my fingers. I took a slow, deliberate sip. The coffee was strong, rich, and bitter. It tasted like reality. Brad took my silence as an invitation to speak. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, smearing snot across his expensive polo shirt. "Vanessa," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "You know how she is. She is fiery. She has a temper. She gets it from... Well, she is passionate. She didn't mean to hurt you. It was just the stress. The market is down. The crypto crash. We were just so stressed." I set the cup down. I looked at him. "So it is the market's fault?" I asked, my voice level. "The economy made her slap her father. The price of Bitcoin made you try to sell my house out from under me." No, that is not what I mean," Brad said, waving his hands frantically. "I mean, she wasn't thinking straight. But Dad, I swear I told her to stop. I told her we shouldn't do it. I was on your side. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that made Brad flinch. You were on my side, I repeated. Is that why you were eating my bacon while she handed me an eviction notice? Is that why you laughed when she hit me? Is that why you have been living in my house for 2 years without paying a dime of rent while you spent your savings on digital monkey pictures? Brad's face flushed a deep crimson. But I didn't hit you, he whined. That is why the sheriff didn't take me right. I am innocent. I am just caught in the middle. He stood up slowly, testing the waters, seeing if the sheriff would tackle him. When Miller didn't move, Brad gained a little confidence. He smoothed his shirt. He tried to put on his best salesman face, the one he used when he was trying to sell a house with a leaking roof to a first-time buyer. Look, Thad, he said, switching from Dad to my first name, trying to establish a peer-to-peer connection. This whole thing is a mess. A tragedy, really. But we can fix it. Vanessa is going to be in jail for a while, obviously, and that is unfortunate. But you and I, we are still here. We are the men of the house. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to cut a deal over the warm corpse of his marriage. So, here is what we do. Brad continued pacing a little now, his energy returning. I will talk to Vanessa. I will tell her she needs to apologize. Serious apology. And in the meantime, I will stay here. I will look after the place. I will make sure everything runs smooth while you recover. And hey, we will start looking for a new place. Give us 2 weeks. No, make it a month, just to be safe. We will be out of your hair in a month, I promise. He smiled. It was a weak, watery smile, but he thought he had nailed the close. He thought he had negotiated a settlement. I looked at Reginald Baxter. My lawyer was sitting calmly at the table, his briefcase open in front of him. He was watching Brad with the same expression a scientist watches a bacteria slide. Reginald, I said, does Mr. Turner reside here? Reginald adjusted his glasses. He looked at a document in his file. According to the county records and the lease agreements on file, no, he said. There is no rental agreement, there is no CO ownership, there is no utility bill in his name. Legally speaking, Mr. Turner has the status of a long-term guest. Brad frowned. Guest. I have lived here for 2 years. I have mail coming here. That establishes residency. You can't just kick me out. I know my rights. I am a real estate agent, for God's sake. I know eviction law. You have to give me 30 days' notice, minimum. He crossed his arms, looking smug. He thought he had me. He thought the law was a shield he could hide behind. Reginald sighed. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was thick bonded paper with a blue court stamp at the top. Actually, Mr. Turner, Reginald said, sliding the paper across the mahogany table toward Brad. That would be true if this were a simple landlord-tenant dispute, but this situation is somewhat more complex. Brad looked at the paper. He didn't pick it up. He stared at it like it was a snake. What is this? He asked. That, Reginald said, is an emergency protective order granted by Judge Henderson at 7:30 this morning. It acts as an immediate restraining order. It bars you and Vanessa Coleman from coming within 500 feet of Thaddeus Coleman or his residence effective immediately. Brad picked up the paper, his hands shaking again. Restraining order. But why? I didn't hit him. The order covers emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit fraud, Reginald explained calmly. Given the video evidence of your complicity in the assault and the documented attempts to defraud a senior citizen, the judge felt there was an imminent threat to my client's safety and well-being. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Brad's. And because this is a protective order issued in a case of domestic violence and elder abuse, tenancy laws do not apply. You are not being evicted, Mr. Turner. You are being removed for the safety of the victim. Brad dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to the broken glasses. Removed, he whispered. Right now, Reginald said, checking his watch. Immediate effect. Which means if you are still on this property in, let us say, 10 minutes, Sheriff Miller will have to arrest you for violating a court order, and since you are already a person of interest in a financial crimes investigation, I doubt the judge will grant bail. Brad looked at Miller. Miller tapped his fingers on his gun belt. 10 minutes, son, Miller rumbled, and I drive fast, so the jail is only about 15 minutes away. Brad looked at me. His smugness was gone. His confidence was shattered. He looked around the room, realizing that the walls he thought protected him were actually closing in. Thad, please, he begged. You can't do this. I have nowhere to go. My parents are in Ohio. I don't have any money. Vanessa controlled the accounts. I know, I said. Then how am I supposed to live? He cried. I have clothes upstairs. I have my computer, my mining rig, my sneakers collection. I can't move all that in 10 minutes. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor. I walked past him toward the kitchen. Where are you going? He asked, hope flickering in his voice. Are you getting the car keys? I didn't answer. I walked into the pantry. I smelled the flour and the spices. I reached down to the bottom shelf where I kept the cleaning supplies. I grabbed a box of heavy-duty contractor trash bags, the black ones, the ones I used for yard waste and bones. I walked back into the dining room. I tossed the box at Brad. It hit him in the chest. He fumbled to catch it, dropping it on the table. What is this? He asked. Luggage, I said. He stared at me. You have feet, I said, pointing to his expensive sneakers. And you have hands. I suggest you use them. You fill one bag, that is your limit. Whatever fits in one bag you take. Whatever is left behind belongs to me. And I am going to have a bonfire in the backyard tonight. One bag, he screamed. My sneakers alone take up 3 bags. My computer tower, my monitors. My rig is worth $5,000. Then you better figure out how to fit it in a trash bag, I said, my voice cold. Because your time is ticking. I looked at the grandfather clock. You have 8 minutes left. Brad stood there paralyzed by the choice. He looked at the bag, he looked at the stairs, he looked at me. You are a monster, he hissed. You are a cruel old man. Vanessa was right about you. I took a step toward him. Vanessa is in a cell, I said. Do you want to join her? Brad flinched. He grabbed a bag from the box, ripping it open. He ran for the stairs. I heard him scrambling up the steps, tripping and cursing. I heard the door to the guest room slam open. I heard the sound of drawers being ripped out and dumped onto the floor. I heard the clatter of plastic and metal. I sat back down. I picked up a biscuit. It was cold now, but I buttered it anyway. I looked at Reginald. You think he can fit the computer in the bag? I asked. Reginald took a sip of his coffee. Not if he takes the sneakers, he said. Physics is a harsh mistress. We sat there listening to the sounds of a man's life being dismantled. We heard him running back and forth. We heard something heavy crash to the floor, probably the computer tower. We heard him sobbing. It was the sound of greed panic. He wasn't grabbing the things he needed. He wasn't grabbing socks or underwear or a toothbrush. He was grabbing the things he thought gave him value. The brands, the electronics, the symbols of a status he never earned. 5 minutes passed. Sheriff Miller checked his watch. Time is almost up, he said. I stood up and walked to the bottom of the stairs. Brad, I shouted. 2 minutes. If you are not down here, I am locking the door. He appeared at the top of the stairs a moment later. He was a sight to behold. He was wearing 3 jackets layered on top of each other, sweating profusely. He had the black trash bag slung over his shoulder, bulging with sharp angles and wires. He was carrying a pair of limited edition Jordans around his neck, tied by the laces. Under his other arm, he had his gaming laptop. He looked like a scavenging raccoon that had raided a Best Buy. He stumbled down the stairs, the bag banging against the banister. He almost fell twice. He reached the bottom, panting. He looked at me with pure venom. I hope you die alone, he spat. I hope you rot in this big, empty house. I looked at him. I looked at the bag that contained his entire world. I am not alone, Brad, I said. I have my dignity, and I have my house. I opened the front door. The morning air rushed in. Get out, I said. He walked past me, struggling with the weight of the bag. He stepped onto the porch. He stopped and turned around. Can I at least call an Uber? He asked. My phone is dead. I looked at him. Start walking, I said. The library has public chargers. It is 3 miles that way. I pointed down the street. He stared at me one last time, hoping for a crack in the armor, hoping for the old Thad, the nice Thad, to reappear. He didn't find him. He turned and walked down the steps. He dragged the bag down the driveway, the plastic tearing on the asphalt, spilling a charging cable. He didn't stop to pick it up. I watched him go. I watched him shrink into the distance, a small man with a big bag of nothing. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the chain. The sound of the lock clicking shut was the best sound I had heard all year. I turned back to the dining room. Reginald and the sheriff were standing up, gathering their things. Well, Thad, Reginald said, closing his briefcase. That went about as well as could be expected. Better, I said. I looked at the table. The breakfast was ruined. The coffee was cold. But the house was mine again. The air felt lighter. The shadows were gone. Sheriff Miller put on his hat. "I will file the report, Thad," he said. "And I will make sure the deputies keep an eye on the place tonight, just in case he comes back." "He won't come back," I said. "He is too scared, and he has bigger problems coming." Reginald nodded. "The financial investigation. Speaking of which, Thad, I have that file you asked for, the one on Brad's spending." I took the blue folder from him. "Thank you, Reginald." They left. I was alone. I sat down in my armchair in the living room. I opened the folder. I looked at the credit card statements. I looked at the motel receipts. I looked at the jewelry store invoices for items I had never seen Vanessa wear. I smiled. Brad thought he was homeless. He thought he was broke. He didn't know that I had the ammunition to make sure he never had a peaceful day again. I took out my phone. I dialed a number. It was the number for the motel on the edge of town. Front desk, a bored voice answered. "Yes," I said. "I am looking for a guest. A Mr. Brad Turner. He stays there on Tuesdays." "Oh yeah, Brad," the clerk said. "He isn't here right now. Usually comes in the afternoon. With his friend." Jessica. Jessica. I wrote the name down. "Thank you," I said. I hung up. Brad had a secret named Jessica, and he had been paying for her with my daughter's money. I looked at the trash bag Brad had dropped on the driveway in his mind. I looked at the empty house. The eviction was just the physical part. Now it was time for the emotional eviction. I was going to make sure that even if Vanessa got out of jail, she would never take him back. I was going to burn that bridge so thoroughly that not even the ashes would remain. I closed the folder. It was time to make another call. But first I was going to clean my kitchen. Mise en place. Everything in its place. And Brad's place was in the gutter. The door had barely closed behind Brad's retreating figure when the doorbell rang. It was a soft, hesitant ring, not the frantic pounding of a desperate man, but the tentative press of someone who knew they weren't welcome. I looked at Reginald. He raised an eyebrow. Sheriff Miller adjusted his belt. I opened the door. It was Brad. He was standing on the porch clutching his trash bag, his face streaked with tears and sweat. He looked pathetic. He looked broken. But there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of defiance, a last-ditch attempt to salvage his pride. "Thad," he said, his voice trembling, "please, just listen to me for a second. Before you throw me away completely, just listen." I stood in the doorway blocking his entry. "You have 10 seconds, Brad," I said. "It is about Vanessa," he said quickly. "You think I am the bad guy. You think I am the one who corrupted her. But you don't know what it is like living with her, Thad. She is difficult. She is demanding. I tried to make her happy. I tried to give her everything she wanted. The car, the trips, the clothes." He took a breath, his chest heaving. "I did it out of love," he whispered. "I love this family. I love Vanessa. I love Maya. I would do anything for them, even if it meant making mistakes. I am not a monster, Thad. I am just a man who tried too hard." I stared at him. It was a good speech. Rehearsed, probably. He had probably practiced it in the mirror while he was packing his bag. He was playing the victim card, the misunderstood provider card. He wanted me to feel sorry for him. He wanted me to believe that his greed was actually love. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "Love," I repeated. "You did it for love." "Yes," Brad said, nodding eagerly, hope sparking in his eyes. "I love her, Thad, more than anything." I turned to Reginald. "Give me the file, Reginald," I said. Reginald reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a slim blue folder. He walked over and handed it to me. I held the folder in my hand. It felt light, but I knew it contained a bomb. I looked at Brad. "If you love her so much, Brad," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "why did you spend $3,000 last month at the Starlight Motel?" Brad's face went white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I opened the folder. I pulled out a stack of papers. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, surveillance photos. I held up a photo. It was grainy, taken with a long lens, but it was unmistakable. It showed Brad walking into a motel room. He wasn't alone. He was with a woman, a young, blonde woman. He had his arm around her waist. He was laughing. "And who is Jessica?" I asked. Brad made a strangling noise. "Jessica, she is my secretary. We were working Working, I asked. You work at a motel on the edge of town, on Tuesday afternoons, while your wife is at yoga. I flipped through the papers. Here is a receipt for a diamond necklace, I said, reading from a statement. $2,000. Bought 3 weeks ago. Vanessa doesn't have a diamond necklace, Brad. I checked her jewelry box. Brad was shaking his head back and forth, back and forth. No, that was a gift. For Vanessa. I was going to give it to her for her birthday. Her birthday is in November, I said. It is June. I pulled out another paper. And here is a lease agreement, I said. For an apartment on 4th Street, 1 bedroom, signed by you, paid for with Vanessa's credit card. I looked at him. You are paying rent for your mistress with your wife's money, I said. You are stealing from my daughter to fund your affair. Is that love, Brad? Is that how you show your devotion? Brad collapsed. He didn't fall, he just slid down the doorframe until he was sitting on the porch. He put his head in his hands. You don't understand, he sobbed. Vanessa, she is cold. She is mean. She treats me like an employee. Jessica listens to me. She respects me. I laughed. A harsh barking sound. She respects your wallet, I said. Or rather, she respects my daughter's wallet. Because you don't have any money, Brad. You are broke. You are a leech feeding off another leech. I threw the folder at him. The papers scattered across the porch, fluttering in the wind like dead leaves. Take it, I said. Take your proof of love. And get off my property. Brad scrambled to pick up the papers. He was frantic, trying to gather the evidence of his betrayal before the wind took it. He shoved the photos and receipts into his pocket. Please, Thad, he begged, looking up at me. Don't tell Vanessa, please. She will kill me. If she finds out, she will destroy me. I looked at him with pure disgust. You think I need to tell her? I asked. I pointed to the driveway where the sheriff's car had been. She is in jail, Brad. She is facing felony charges. Do you think she is going to protect you when the investigators start looking at the finances? Do you think she is going to cover for you when they see the motel charges? I leaned down close to his face. She is going to find out, I whispered. And when she does, she isn't going to kill you. She is going to testify against you. She is going to tell them everything, every fraudulent check, every stolen dollar, every lie. She is going to trade you for a lighter sentence. Brad stared at me, horror dawning in his eyes. He realized I was right. He knew his wife. He knew she would throw him to the wolves to save herself. You are dead, Brad, I said, standing up. You just don't know it yet. Now run. He ran. He grabbed his trash bag and sprinted down the driveway. He didn't look back. He ran like the devil was chasing him, and in a way he was. The truth was coming for him, and it had teeth. I watched him go. I watched him disappear around the corner, a small, desperate man running toward a future that held nothing but ruin. I turned back to the house. Reginald and the sheriff were watching me. You knew, Miller said. You knew about the girl. I knew, I said, walking back into the dining room. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago. When money started disappearing from my accounts, I wanted to know where it was going. I thought it was just greed. I didn't know it was lust, too. Reginald shook his head. He is going to lose everything, Thad. Vanessa will divorce him. The mistress will leave him when the money stops. He will be destitute. Good, I said, sitting down at the table. I picked up a piece of bacon. It was cold, but I ate it anyway. A man who betrays his family deserves to be alone, I said. But I wasn't done. I looked at the empty chair where Vanessa had sat. I looked at the spot where she had slapped me. I had dealt with the immediate threat. I had removed the cancer from my house. But there was still a tumor left. A tumor named Maya, my granddaughter. She was 10 years old. She was at summer camp in the mountains, oblivious to the fact that her world had just exploded. She didn't know her mother was in jail. She didn't know her father was homeless. She was innocent, and she was coming home in 2 days. I looked at Reginald. We need to talk about custody, I said. Reginald opened his briefcase. He pulled out a new file. I thought you might say that he said. I have the papers ready. Emergency guardianship petition. Based on the arrest of the mother and the instability of the father, we have a strong case. But Brad will fight it, I said. He will use her as leverage. He will try to get money out of me to give her up. Reginald nodded. He will try. But after what just happened, after the evidence we have, it might not be enough, I said, interrupting him. The courts favor the biological parents, even bad ones. Unless what Miller asked. Unless I can prove he is dangerous, I said. Not just a thief, not just a cheater, but dangerous. I looked at the sheriff. Did you run his background check, Miller? I asked. The deep one, the one I asked for last week. Miller nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I did that. And you were right, it is not pretty. He unfolded the paper and placed it on the table. Bradley Turner Miller read. Arrested 5 years ago in Ohio. Aggravated assault. He got into a bar fight. Put a man in the hospital. Charges were dropped because the victim was paid off. But the record is there. I smiled. A cold, grim smile. And there it is, I said. The final nail. He is violent. He is unstable. He is a flight risk. I looked at Reginald. File the petition, I said. Today. Right now. I want temporary custody before the sun goes down. I want to be the one who picks her up from camp. Not him, not social services. Me. Reginald nodded. Consider it done. I looked out the window at the bright morning sun. The storm had passed, but the wreckage was still there. I had a lot of work to do. I had a house to clean. I had a business to run. And I had a little girl to save. Brad thought he had lost everything. He thought the trash bag was the end of his story. He didn't know that I was about to take the only thing he had left that mattered, his daughter. But I wasn't taking her to hurt him. I was taking her to save her from becoming like them, to save her from the greed and the lies and the violence. I was going to raise her right. I was going to teach her to cook. I was going to teach her respect. I was going to make sure the Coleman legacy didn't end in a jail cell or a motel room. I stood up. Gentlemen, I said, thank you for coming. Breakfast is over. I walked them to the door. I shook their hands. When they left, I locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I was alone in my house. My cheeks still throbbed, my heart still ached. But I was standing. I walked into the kitchen. I started to clean up. I scraped the plates. I washed the silver. I put everything back in its place. Mise en place. Everything in its place. And Maya's place was here, with me. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number for the summer camp. Hello, I said when the director answered. This is Thaddeus Coleman, Maya's grandfather. I will be picking her up on Friday. Yes, just me. No, her parents won't be coming. They have been detained. I hung up. I looked at the picture of Maya on the fridge. She was smiling a gap-toothed grin holding a whisk covered in batter. She looked like me. She looked like Beatrice. I am coming, baby girl, I whispered. Grandpa is coming. And anyone who stood in my way was going to get burned. The wind picked up, swirling the fallen leaves around the porch where Brad stood clutching the folder of evidence to his chest like it was a shield against the inevitable. For a moment he just stared at me, his eyes wide and wet with the tears of a man who had been caught, but then something shifted. The pathetic whimper died in his throat. The slump in his shoulders straightened into a rigid line of tension. The fear that had defined him for the last hour evaporated, and in its place something ugly and raw began to fester. He realized he had nothing left to lose. His wife was in handcuffs. His home was gone. His secret affair was exposed. His reputation was in tatters. And when a man like Brad realizes the game is over, he stops playing by the rules. He stops pretending to be the nice guy, the victim, the misunderstood son-in-law. He shows you his teeth. He threw the blue folder onto the ground. The papers spilled out again, photos of him and Jessica scattering across the wooden planks of my porch. He stepped on a photo of his own face, grinding his heel into it. You think you are so smart, don't you? He spat. His voice had changed. It wasn't the voice of the begging child anymore. It was the voice of the arrogance that had walked into my kitchen and eaten my bacon. You think you are some kind of king sitting on your throne judging everyone else? I didn't move. I stood in the doorway, blocking his path back into the warmth. I crossed my arms over my chest and watched the transformation. I am not a king, Brad, I said calmly. I am just a man who pays his bills. You are a tyrant, he screamed, his face turning a mottled red. You are a bitter, lonely old dictator who can't stand to see anyone else happy. That is why you did this, isn't it? You couldn't stand that Vanessa and I had a life. You couldn't stand that we were building something, so you tore it down. You set us up. I shook my head slowly. I didn't set you up, Brad. I didn't tell you to sleep with your secretary. I didn't tell you to spend my daughter's money on a motel room. I didn't tell you to stand by and laugh while your wife assaulted her father. You built this house of cards all by yourself. I just opened a window." He laughed. It was a jagged, manic sound. "You ruined Vanessa," he shouted, pointing a finger at me. "She was fine before you started this. She was happy. We were happy. You drove her crazy with your stubbornness. You made her snap. This is your fault, Thad. You are going to die alone in this big, empty museum, and nobody is going to come to your funeral because you drove everyone away." I felt a twinge of pain at his words, but I pushed it down. He was trying to hurt me because he was bleeding. "Beatrice would be ashamed of you," he sneered. "She was a saint. She would hate what you have become. A vindictive, sad old man who destroys his own family for sport." That was the line. He could insult me. He could steal from me, but he could not speak her name. My eyes narrowed. The temperature on the porch seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Keep my wife's name out of your mouth," I said, my voice low and vibrating with a threat that even a fool like Brad could understand. "You didn't know her. You didn't deserve to breathe the same air she did. Beatrice knew exactly what you were, Brad. She told me the first day Vanessa brought you home. She said that boy has empty eyes. She said he is looking for a host, not a wife." Brad flinched, but he didn't back down. He was fueled by the adrenaline of the crash. Whatever he yelled, "I don't need you. I don't need this house. I don't need your charity. I have skills. I have connections. I am going to bounce back, and when I do, I am going to buy and sell you, old man. I am going to laugh when I see your obituary." He turned around and marched down the steps. He walked with a swagger that didn't match his situation. He walked like a man who still thought he had an exit strategy. He headed straight for the driveway. He was walking toward the black SUV, the luxury car he drove around town like a billboard for his success. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key fob. He pressed the unlock button. The lights of the car flashed. The chirp of the alarm disengaging echoed in the quiet morning. He reached for the door handle. "Hold on," I called out. Brad froze. He didn't turn around. He just gripped the handle. "What now?" he shouted over his shoulder. "You kicked me out. I am leaving. Let me go." "You are leaving," I agreed, walking down the steps. "But you are not taking that car." Brad spun around. His face was a mask of disbelief. "Excuse me," he said. "This is my car. I drive it. I wash it. My gym bag is in the trunk." I stopped at the bottom of the steps. I looked at the shiny black metal of the SUV. It was a beautiful machine, too good for him. "You drive it," I said, "but you don't own it." "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "I am talking about the title, Brad. I am talking about the lease agreement. Do you remember who signed the papers 3 years ago when your credit score was too low to qualify? Do you remember who put down the deposit? Do you remember whose name is on the registration in the glove box?" Brad's mouth opened and closed. He remembered. Of course he remembered. He just chose to forget because forgetting was easier than gratitude. "You co-signed," he stammered. "That doesn't mean it is yours. I make the payments." "You made 3 payments in 2021, I corrected him. "I made the rest. Every single month. $580 automatic withdrawal from the account Vanessa controlled, the account I funded." I held out my hand, palm up, expectant. "Give me the keys, Brad." He clutched the fob to his chest like a child holding a toy. "No. No way. You can't do this. How am I supposed to leave? How am I supposed to get to a hotel? It is freezing out here." "I don't care," I said. "Walk, call a cab, hitchhike. But you are not driving my car. That vehicle is an asset of the Coleman Family Trust, and since you are no longer family, you don't get the perks." He looked at the car. He looked at the open road. He knew that without wheels he was just a vagrant with a trash bag. The car was his last shred of dignity, his last connection to the life he thought he deserved. He tried to get in. He pulled the handle. I moved faster than he expected. I was 75, but I still had the reach. I grabbed the door before he could open it fully. I slammed it shut. The sound was like a gunshot. "Give me the keys," I said again, my voice harder this time. "Or I will call Sheriff Miller back here and tell him you are attempting grand theft auto. He is only 5 minutes away, Brad. Do you want to join your wife in a cell?" Brad looked at my hand on the door. He looked at the street where the police cruiser had disappeared. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew Miller would turn around in a heartbeat. He let out a sound of pure frustration, a scream of impotent rage. He threw the keys at me. They hit my chest and fell to the asphalt. "Fine," he screamed. "Keep it. Keep the damn car. It needs an oil change anyway. I hope it breaks down. I hope you crash it." He bent down to pick up his black trash bag, the plastic stretched and strained against the sharp corners of his computer tower. "I am leaving," he shouted, "and don't expect to ever see me again." "Wait," I said. He stopped breathing heavily. "What? What else do you want?" "My blood. You want my kidney." I pointed at his hand, the one holding the trash bag. "The phone," I said. Brad looked at the smartphone in his hand. It was the latest model $1,000 piece of glass and silicon. "You have got to be kidding me," he whispered. "I am not kidding," I said. "Who pays the bill, Brad? Who is the account holder?" "Vanessa pays the bill," he said. "And who gives Vanessa the money?" I asked. He stared at me. His eyes were filling with tears again, tears of total defeat. "That phone is part of the family plan," I said. "My plan. I pay the bill every month, and I am canceling your line as soon as you walk off this property. But the device itself, that belongs to me too. I paid for the upgrade last Christmas. Remember, you said thank you, Thad. You said it was the best gift ever." He gripped the phone. His knuckles were white. "I have my contacts in here," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "I have my photos. I have my crypto wallet access. I have my life in here, Thad. You can't take my phone. It is cruel." "Cruel?" I asked. "Cruel is using that phone to text your mistress while sitting at my dinner table. Cruel is using that phone to help your wife look up nursing homes for me. Cruel is using that phone to laugh at me with your friends." I took a step closer. "Put it on the hood of the car. Now." Brad looked at the phone. He looked at the screen one last time. He was saying goodbye to his digital life, to his connections, to his escape. He placed it gently on the hood of the black SUV. "Now the watch," I said. He looked at his wrist. It was an Apple Watch. "That is linked to the phone plan," I said. "Take it off." He unbuckled the strap. His hands were shaking so bad he fumbled it. He placed it next to the phone. "Anything else?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "Do you want my shirt? Do you want my shoes?" I looked at his shoes. They were expensive limited edition sneakers. I had paid for them too, indirectly. But I wasn't going to send him out barefoot. I wasn't a monster. I was just a repo man collecting a debt that was long overdue. "Keep the shoes," I said. "You have a lot of walking to do." He picked up his trash bag. It was heavy. He had to use both hands to hoist it over his shoulder. He looked like a hobo. He looked like a refugee from a war he had started and lost. He looked at me one last time. There was no anger left in his face, just emptiness. He had been stripped of everything that made him feel like a man. The car, the phone, the watch, the house, the wife. All he had left was himself, and he was realizing that himself wasn't very much. "You win, Thad," he said softly. "You win." I didn't answer. There was no winning here. There was only cleaning up the mess. He turned and started walking down the driveway. He walked slowly, his expensive sneakers scuffing against the pavement. The trash bag bumped against his leg with every step. I watched him reach the street. I watched him turn left. He didn't know where he was going. He was just going away. The neighbors were watching. I saw curtains twitching in the windows across the street. Mrs. Gable was standing on her porch pretending to water her plants, her eyes glued to the spectacle of my son-in-law dragging his life down the road in a garbage bag. Let them look. Let them see. I picked up the keys from the ground. I picked up the phone and the watch from the hood of the car. I walked back up the steps to my porch. I turned and looked at the empty driveway, the empty street. Brad was gone. He was a speck in the distance, a bad memory fading into the morning sun. I walked back inside my house. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a fever breaks. I walked into the dining room. Reginald and the sheriff were gone. They had slipped out while I was handling Brad, giving me the space to finish it. I sat down at the head of the table. The food was cold. The coffee was stale, but I felt full. I picked up the blue folder, the one Brad had thrown on the ground. I dusted it off. I put the photos of him and Jessica back inside. I didn't need them anymore. The truth had done its work. I looked at the empty chairs. My family was gone. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt clean. I stood up. I began to clear the table. I scraped the leftover ribs into the trash. I poured the cold coffee down the sink. I loaded the dishwasher. I washed my hands. I scrubbed them with hot water and soap. I washed away the grease. I washed away the anger. I dried my hands on a clean towel. I looked around my kitchen, my domain. It was time to start over. But first I had to check the house. I had to make sure they hadn't left any other surprises. I had to reclaim every inch of my territory. I walked upstairs. I went to the master bedroom, the room they had claimed. I opened the door, and that is when I saw it. Under the bed, a corner of a wooden box was sticking out. It wasn't my silver box. It was older. It was darker. It was Beatrice's jewelry box, the one that had been missing for 2 years. My heart stopped. I walked over and pulled it out. It was heavy. I opened it, empty except for one thing, a pawn shop ticket, dated 3 days ago. I felt a new kind of rage, a hot, burning fire that threatened to consume me. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had stolen her memory. I gripped the ticket. Brad thought he had hit rock bottom. He thought he was walking away with nothing. He was wrong. He was walking away with a debt he couldn't pay. And I was going to make sure he paid it. I took out my burner phone. I dialed a number. Not the lawyer, not the sheriff. I dialed the number of the pawn shop on the ticket. "I am coming," I whispered. And God help anyone who stood in my way. The front door clicked shut, sealing out the morning chill and the pathetic sight of Brad dragging his garbage bag down the street. Sheriff Miller touched the brim of his hat. He didn't need to say anything. He knew the law had done its part, but he also knew the family business wasn't finished yet. He walked to his cruiser, leaving me alone in the hallway with Reginald Baxter. The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Before it was the silence of a home being held hostage. Now it was the silence of a crime scene after the bodies have been cleared. Reginald cleared his throat. He adjusted his glasses, looking up the staircase where the shadows seemed to cling a little tighter to the banister. "Thad," he said, his voice low and respectful, "we need to do a walkthrough." I knew what he meant. We needed to document the state of the house. We needed to inventory what was left and what was broken. But more than that, I needed to reclaim my territory. I needed to walk into the rooms they had occupied and scrub their presence from the air. I nodded. "Let us go upstairs." My knees popped as we climbed. I felt every year of my 75 years in my joints, but I didn't slow down. I gripped the railing, the wood smooth under my hand, polished by Beatrice's hands for 4 decades before Vanessa and Brad put their sticky fingers on it. We reached the landing. The door to the master bedroom was open. This had been my room. This had been the room where Beatrice and I slept, where we whispered in the dark, where we planned our future. When Beatrice died, I moved to the guest room downstairs. It was too big without her, too full of memories. Vanessa had moved in the week after the funeral. She said it was to be closer to me. I knew now it was just to be closer to the safe. I stepped across the threshold. The room was a disaster. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled and gray. Clothes were piled on the floor, designer dresses and silk shirts mixed with dirty laundry. It smelled of stale perfume and Brad's cheap body spray. It smelled like disrespect. Reginald took out his phone and started taking pictures. Click, 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 documenting the chaos. I walked to the dresser, my mahogany dresser. There were rings of water on the wood where they had left glasses without coasters. There were deep scratches in the finish. I opened the top drawer. It was empty except for a few bobby pins and a stray receipt. "Check the closet," Reginald said from the doorway. "We need to make sure they didn't take anything structural. Fixtures, sconces. You would be surprised what people steal when they are evicted." I walked to the walk-in closet. It was empty of their clothes now, just wire hangers jangling on the rod like wind chimes. Then I saw it. In the corner of the closet, pushed far back behind a stack of shoeboxes, I saw a corner of dark wood. It wasn't part of the floor. It wasn't part of the baseboard. I knelt down. My heart started to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew that wood. I knew the grain. I knew the varnish because I had applied it myself 50 years ago. I reached out and pulled. It was heavy. It dragged across the carpet with a muffled thud. Reginald stopped taking pictures. He sensed the shift in the air. "What is it, Thad?" he asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I pulled the box out into the light. It was a jewelry box, hand-carved from black walnut inlaid with mother of pearl. I had made it for Beatrice on our first wedding anniversary. I had carved her initials into the lid. BC Beatrice Coleman. It had been missing for 2 years. I remembered the day it vanished. It was a Tuesday. Vanessa had come over for lunch. She had been sweet attentive. She had gone upstairs to use the bathroom. After she left, I went to look for Beatrice's pearls to polish them. The box was gone. I had torn the house apart. I thought I had misplaced it. I thought maybe in my grief I had moved it and forgotten. I never accused her. I never wanted to believe my own daughter would steal the one thing that meant the most to me. But here it was, hidden in her closet, buried under her shoe boxes like a piece of trash. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely lift the latch. Thad, Reginald whispered, stepping closer. "Is that—" I flipped the lid open. The velvet lining was still bright red, and there, resting in the soft fabric, were the ghosts of my marriage. The pearl necklace I bought when we opened the first restaurant, the diamond brooch from our 25th anniversary, the gold locket with her mother's picture inside, the sapphire earrings she wore to Vanessa's graduation. They were all there. She hadn't sold them. She hadn't pawned them. She had kept them. Why? Was she waiting for the market to go up? Was she saving them as a rainy day fund? Or was it something darker? Did she keep them as trophies? Did she keep them just to deprive me of them? Just to watch me search for them in a panic while she smiled and said, "Mom probably put them somewhere safe, Dad. You know how forgetful you are getting." I picked up the locket. The gold was cold against my skin. I opened it. Beatrice's face smiled back at me, frozen in black and white. A sound escaped my throat. It wasn't a word. It was a noise of pure, raw pain. A sound I hadn't made since the day the monitor flatlined in the hospital. I collapsed. I sat on the floor of my defiled bedroom, holding the box to my chest, and I wept. I cried for the loss of my wife. I cried for the loss of my daughter. I cried for the 2 years I had spent thinking I was losing my mind, thinking I had lost her jewelry because I was old and careless. Vanessa had let me believe I was senile. She had watched me tear the house apart. She had watched me cry over this box. And all the while it was sitting right here under her bed. "She stole my memories, Reginald," I choked out. "She stole her mother." Reginald knelt beside me. He didn't touch me. He just sat there, bearing witness to the grief. "That is a felony, Thad," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Grand larceny, the value of those items." "It is not the value," I roared. The anger surged up, replacing the tears, burning them away like steam. I looked at him, my eyes wet but furious. "It is not about the money, Reginald. It never was." I stood up. I clutched the box so tight the wood dug into my palms. "This was her mother's soul," I said. "Beatrice wore these every Sunday. She wore them to pray. She wore them to celebrate. And Vanessa, she treated them like currency. She hid them like stolen goods." I walked to the window. I looked out at the street where Brad had disappeared, where Vanessa had been driven away. I thought I was angry before I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I thought the slap was the end. I thought the eviction was enough punishment. I turned back to Reginald. I was wrong. Reginald stood up and brushed off his knees. "What do you want to do, Thad?" "I want to destroy them," I said. "Not just their bank accounts, not just their housing. I want to destroy their peace. I want to destroy their future. I want them to feel exactly what I felt when I thought this box was gone forever. I want them to feel empty." Reginald nodded. He opened his briefcase. "We can add this to the charges," he said. "Theft of property over $5,000. Possession of stolen goods. We can ensure she does not get bail. We can ensure she stays in that cell until the trial." "Do it," I said. "But that is not enough." I looked at the box again. I traced the inlay with my thumb. "Brad knew," I said. "He lived in this room. He knew it was here." "He is an accomplice," Reginald said. "He is worse," I said. "He is a coward who watched his wife steal from her dead mother and said nothing." I walked out of the room. I couldn't stay in there anymore. The air felt poisoned. I carried the box downstairs. I placed it on the dining room table right in the center where the ribs had been. I sat down. I stared at it. "This changes the plan." "Reginald," I said. "How so?" "Before today, I just wanted them out," I said. "I just wanted to be left alone. I was going to let them struggle. I was going to let them fail, but I was going to let them be." I looked up at him. "Now I am going to hunt them. I am going to find every rock they try to hide under. I am going to find every person they try to leech off of. I am going to make sure that every door they try to open is locked tight. Reginald sat down opposite me. He took out a notepad. Where do we start? We start with the child, I said. Reginald paused, his pen hovering over the paper. Maya, he said. My granddaughter, I said. She is at camp. She comes back in 2 days. Vanessa and Brad have custody, Reginald said. Even with the arrest, they are the biological parents. Brad is free. He will claim her. He will use her as a shield. He will use her to get to you. He will demand money for child support. He will demand access to the house for visitation. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf who has cornered a rabbit. He will try, I said, but he forgets one thing. What is that? I know where the bodies are buried, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the blue folder, the one with the evidence of Brad's affair, the one he had dropped in his panic. I also know about the offshore account he tried to open last year, I said. The one he used my social security number for. Reginald's eyes widened. Identity theft. Federal fraud, I corrected. I didn't use it before because I didn't want to send the father of my grandchild to federal prison. I thought eviction was enough. I stroked the lid of the jewelry box, but he touched Beatrice's things. He desecrated her memory. So now the gloves are off, Reginald began writing furiously. I can file for emergency custody, he said. Based on the arrest of the mother and the criminal investigation of the father, we can get a temporary order today. We can have Child Protective Services meet us at the camp. No CPS, I said. I don't want my granddaughter in the system. I want her here, in her room, in the bed her grandmother bought for her. Then we need to move fast, Reginald said. Brad will be looking for leverage. He will go to the camp. He will try to get her before we do. Let him try, I said. I stood up. I picked up the jewelry box. I walked to the kitchen. I placed it on the counter next to the coffee maker where Beatrice always used to leave her rings while she cooked. It felt like she was back. It felt like she was watching me. I am going to get her, Beatrice, I whispered to the empty room. I am going to get our girl. And I am going to raise her the way we raised Vanessa before the world ruined her. I turned to Reginald. Get the car, I said. We are going to the courthouse, and then we are going to the mountains. Reginald closed his briefcase. It is a long drive, Thad. I have driven longer, I said. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed my coat. I looked at the spot on the floor where Vanessa had fallen. She wanted a war. She wanted to play games with my life. She forgot that I wrote the rule book. I walked out the door into the bright, harsh sunlight. The day was just beginning. And for Brad Turner, it was about to get a whole lot darker. The drive to the summer camp took 3 hours, but it felt like 3 lifetimes. I sat in the passenger seat of Reginald's luxury sedan, watching the city give way to suburbs, and the suburbs give way to the dense green of the mountains. My hands were folded in my lap, but my thumbs were rubbing together a nervous tic I hadn't had since I opened my first restaurant 40 years ago. We were going to get Maya. She was 10 years old. She had her grandmother's eyes and her mother's smile before her mother forgot how to smile for real. She was innocent. She was the only thing in this entire mess that wasn't tainted by greed or betrayal. And she was currently sitting in a cabin by a lake, completely unaware that her mother was in a jail cell and her father was homeless. Reginald had been on the phone for the first hour of the drive, navigating the labyrinth of the family court system. He had called in favors. He had leveraged his reputation. He had managed to get an emergency hearing with a judge who owed him a golf game. We have a temporary order, Thad, Reginald said, hanging up the phone as we started to climb the winding mountain roads. It grants you emergency temporary guardianship pending a full investigation. The judge agreed that given Vanessa's arrest and Brad's situation, the stable environment of your home is the best place for the child. I nodded, looking out at the pine trees blurring past. Stable, I repeated. My house was a crime scene this morning, Reginald. The dining room smells like fear and bacon. It is a palace compared to where she would go otherwise, Reginald said, his voice grim. If we didn't have this order, Child Protective Services would take her into state custody. Foster care, Thad. Strangers. The thought made my blood run cold. My granddaughter sleeping in a strange bed surrounded by strangers, wondering why nobody came for her, not while I had breath in my body. We arrived at the camp gates just after lunch. It was a beautiful place. Sunlight filtered through the trees. I could hear kids laughing in the distance, the splash of water from the lake. It was a paradise, a bubble of happiness that I was about to burst. We parked near the main office. A woman was waiting for us. She wore a lanyard and a serious expression. She introduced herself as Mrs. Rodriguez, the camp director. Beside her was another woman holding a clipboard wearing a state badge, the CPS caseworker. "Mr. Coleman," Mrs. Rodriguez said, shaking my hand. "I remember you. You dropped Maya off 2 weeks ago. You brought cookies for the counselors." I nodded. "Molasses cookies, my mother's recipe." She looked at me with pity. "We received the call from the police department. We know about the situation with Maya's mother. We haven't told Maya yet. We thought it would be better if it came from family." "Thank you," I said. "Where is she?" "She is down by the canoe docks," the caseworker said, stepping forward. "Mr. Coleman, I need to verify your paperwork before we allow you to take the child. This is a highly irregular situation." Reginald stepped in smooth as silk, handing over the court order stamped and signed. "Everything is in order, ma'am," he said. "Judge Holloway signed this an hour ago. Mr. Coleman is the legal guardian effective immediately." The caseworker reviewed the papers. She scrutinized them, looking for a mistake, looking for a reason to exert her authority. But Reginald didn't make mistakes. "It looks valid," she said, finally handing the papers back. "You can take her. But Mr. Coleman, you understand that this is temporary. There will be a hearing next week, and the father, Mr. Turner, he still has parental rights unless they are terminated by a court." "I haven't seen Brad since this morning," I said. "He is not in a position to care for a child. He doesn't have a roof over his head." Just then we heard the sound of an engine. A car was coming up the gravel driveway, fast, too fast. Dust billowed in a cloud behind it. It wasn't a luxury SUV, it was a beat-up yellow taxi. The cab skidded to a halt next to Reginald's car. The door flew open, and Brad stepped out. He looked worse than he had this morning. He was still wearing the layers of jackets, but now they were stained with sweat. He was carrying his black trash bag of belongings, dragging it on the ground. He looked wild, desperate. He saw me and his face twisted. "You!" he shouted, pointing a shaking finger. "You trying to steal her too? You stole my house, you stole my car, and now you want my daughter." Mrs. Rodriguez stepped back, alarmed. The CPS worker stepped forward, her face hardening. "Sir, you need to lower your voice," she said. "This is a children's camp." Brad ignored her. He marched toward me, dropping his trash bag in the dust. "She is my daughter, Thad," he yelled. "I am the father. You have no rights. None. I am taking her." He looked at the caseworker. "I am Bradley Turner. I am her father. I want my daughter. Now." The caseworker looked at him. She looked at his dirty clothes. She looked at the trash bag. She smelled the desperation coming off him in waves. "Mr. Turner," she said calmly, "we have a court order here granting temporary guardianship to Mr. Coleman." "That is a lie," Brad screamed. "He bribed a judge. That is what he does. He uses his money to buy people. I didn't sign anything. I didn't agree to anything. I have rights." He was making a scene. Counselors were looking over. Kids were stopping their games to watch the crazy man yelling in the parking lot. I stepped between him and the camp entrance. "Brad," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Look at yourself. You are homeless. You have no money. You have no car. Where are you going to take her? To the park bench you are sleeping on. To a shelter. I will figure it out," he spat. "She is my kid. She belongs with me, not with the man who put her mother in jail." He tried to push past me. I didn't move. I stood like a rock. "You are not taking her," I said. Brad stopped. He looked at me. He looked at Reginald. He looked at the CPS worker who was already on her phone, probably calling the police. His eyes changed. The anger faded and something else took its place. Something sly. Something reptilian. He took a step back. He lowered his voice so the women couldn't hear. "Fine," he whispered. "You want her so bad, Thad? How much?" I froze. "What did you say?" I asked. Brad smiled. It was a sick, twisted smile. "You heard me," he whispered. "You want custody. You want to play daddy again because you failed with Vanessa. Fine. I will sign the papers. I will walk away. I will go to Ohio and never look back." He leaned in closer. He smelled of unwashed fear. "But it is going to cost you. I need a start, Thad. I need capital. You have millions, right? You have secret accounts. Well, if you want Maya safe in your big empty house, you are going to pay for it. I stared at him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He wasn't fighting for his daughter because he loved her. He wasn't fighting for her because he wanted to protect her. He was using her as a hostage. He was selling his own flesh and blood to the highest bidder. How much, I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely contain. 500,000, Brad whispered. Cash. Crypto. I don't care. 500,000. That is the price. You pay me, and I disappear. You don't pay me, and I will fight you every day. I will drag her into court. I will make her testify. I will tell her you sent her mommy to prison. I will make her hate you. He stepped back, his smile widening. Think about it, Grandpa. You have 24 hours. Or I call the news and tell them the rich chef stole my baby. He turned to the CPS worker, his voice suddenly loud and theatrical again. I am going to get a lawyer, he shouted. This is kidnapping. You will hear from me. He grabbed his trash bag. He walked back to the waiting taxi. He got in and slammed the door. The taxi drove away, leaving a cloud of dust that tasted like ash in my mouth. Reginald walked up to me. He had heard. I knew he had heard. He is selling her. Reginald whispered, his face pale. He is actually selling her. I nodded slowly. He thinks he is, I said. He thinks he found my weak spot. And he is right. Maya is my weak spot. I watched the dust settle. But he forgot one thing, Reginald. What is that, Thad? I don't negotiate with terrorists, I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. The voice recorder app was running. The red light was pulsing. I hit stop. I hit save. I turned to the CPS worker. Ma'am, I said, I think we need to have a conversation about Mr. Turner's fitness as a parent, and I have some audio I think the judge needs to hear. She looked at me. She had seen Brad. She had seen the instability. Get the girl, Mr. Coleman, she said. Get her out of here. We will handle the paperwork. I walked down to the lake. I saw her. Maya was sitting on the dock, her feet dangling in the water. She was wearing a yellow life vest. She was laughing at something a friend said. She looked so small, so fragile. I took a deep breath. I wiped the anger off my face. I put on my grandfather face, the soft one, the one that smelled like cookies and safety. Maya, I called out. She turned. Her face lit up. Grandpa, she yelled, jumping up. She ran down the dock. She ran into my arms. I caught her. I held her tight. I smelled the lake water and the sunshine in her hair. Where are Mom and Dad? She asked, looking behind me. I held her head against my chest so she wouldn't see the tears in my eyes. It is just me today, baby girl, I said. Just me and you. We walked back to the car. I buckled her in. Brad thought he had played an ace. He thought he had me cornered, but he didn't know that by trying to sell his daughter, he had just signed his own death warrant. He wanted a war for custody. He was going to get one, but it wasn't going to be in a courtroom. It was going to be in the street. I got in the car. Let us go home, Reginald, I said. We have a lot of work to do. And Brad needs to learn that some things are not for sale. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and warm apples, but the sweetness in the air could not mask the bitterness in my heart. Maya was sitting at the island, swinging her legs and eating a slice of pie I had just pulled from the oven. She looked happy. She looked safe. She did not know that her father was currently negotiating her future like she was a used car on a lot. I watched her eat, wiping a crumb from her chin. She hummed a little tune, completely unaware that less than 10 miles away, Brad was sitting in a motel room waiting for my call. He had given me an ultimatum. $500,000 in cash or crypto, or he would exercise his parental rights. He would take her. He said he had a cousin in Ohio. He said state lines make custody battles harder. He said I would never see her again. It was a threat. It was extortion. And in the eyes of the law, it was a felony. But Brad was stupid. He thought he was playing poker with a man who only knew how to cook grits. He did not know that I had spent 50 years negotiating with suppliers, health inspectors, and union reps. He did not know that I knew how to spot a bluff. I walked into the study where Reginald Baxter was waiting. He was sitting at my desk listening to a recording on his laptop. It was the audio from the camp parking lot, the recording I had made on my phone. 500,000, cash, crypto. I don't care. Brad's voice filled the room, tinny and desperate. Reginald took off his headphones. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. This is admissible, Thad, he said. In family court, this is a nuclear bomb. He is literally selling his custodial rights. Is it enough to strip him completely? I asked. I do not want visitation, Reginald. I do not want weekends. I do not want him poisoning her mind every other Saturday. I want him gone. Reginald nodded slowly. Combined with the eviction, the lack of income, the adultery evidence, and his past assault charge, yes, we can file for full termination of parental rights, but we need him to sign. If we go to trial, it could take months. Maya would be in limbo. We need him to surrender voluntarily. I looked at the phone on the desk. He wants a meeting, I said. He wants the money today. Then give him a meeting, Reginald said, closing the laptop. But don't bring a checkbook. Bring the sheriff. I called Brad. He answered on the first ring. Do you have it? He asked. No. Hello. No, how is my daughter? Just the greed. I have it, I lied. Meet me at the old gazebo in Centennial Park. Noon. Alone. I will be there, he said. And Thad, if you try anything, if I see a cop, I am gone. And I will take her from school tomorrow. You can't watch her 24/7. I hung up. My hand wanted to crush the phone. He threatened to snatch her from school. He threatened to terrify a 10-year-old girl just to hurt me. I went back to the kitchen. I kissed Maya on the top of her head. Grandpa has to go run an errand. Baby girl, I said, Mrs. Gable from next door is coming over to watch movies with you. You stay inside. She looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes. Are you going to see Daddy? She asked. I paused. I didn't want to lie to her. I am going to take care of business, Maya, I said, so you don't have to worry about anything ever again. I walked out to the car. Reginald was already in the passenger seat. Sheriff Miller was following us in an unmarked sedan. We drove to the park. It was a gray day. The wind was blowing leaves across the grass. The gazebo stood in the center of a clearing, old and peeling paint. It was a place where lovers used to meet. Today, it was a place where a father was going to sell his child. I saw Brad sitting on a bench. He was wearing a hoodie pulled up over his head, trying to hide his face. He looked nervous. He was tapping his foot. He was looking around. I got out of the car. I carried a thick manila envelope. It looked like it was full of cash. It wasn't. I walked toward him. Reginald stayed in the car. Miller was parked 50 yards away, watching through the windshield. Brad stood up when he saw me. He licked his lips. He looked at the envelope in my hand. You brought it, he said, his voice eager. I stopped 10 feet away. I brought it, I said. But I want to hear you say it again, Brad, just so we are clear. Say what he asked. His eyes darting to the envelope. Say that if I give you this, you will sign the papers. You will give up custody. You will leave Maya alone forever. Brad laughed, a nervous, twitchy sound. Yeah, Thad, that is the deal. 500 grand and I am a ghost. I sign the rights over to you. She is your problem now. I just want a fresh start. My problem. He called his daughter a problem. I took a step closer. You don't love her, I asked quietly. You don't want to see her grow up? Brad shrugged. He tried to look tough, but he just looked empty. I can't afford her, Thad. And honestly, she reminds me of Vanessa. I just want out. I want to go to Ohio. I want to start a business. He reached out his hand. Give it to me. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had married my daughter, the man who had lived in my house, the man who had betrayed every trust I had ever placed in him. I extended the envelope. Brad grabbed it. He tore the flap open. He reached inside expecting to feel the crisp texture of $100 bills. Instead, he pulled out a stack of legal documents stapled together. He frowned. He pulled them out further. Petition for termination of parental rights. Affidavit of extortion. Restraining order. He looked up at me, confusion clouding his face. What is this? He asked. Where is the money? There is no money, Brad. I said, my voice hard as the cast iron skillet I used for cornbread. There never was. You lied to me, he shouted, throwing the papers on the ground. You old liar, that is it. The deal is off. I am taking her. I am going to the school right now. He turned to run, but he didn't get far. Sheriff Miller stepped out from behind a large oak tree. He wasn't wearing his uniform today, but the badge on his belt was shiny enough, and the handcuffs in his hand were very real. Going somewhere? Brad Miller asked. Brad spun around. He looked at me. He looked at Miller. He looked at Reginald, who was getting out of the car with a camcorder in his hand. You set me up, he screamed. This is entrapment. It is justice, I said. Miller walked up to him. He didn't rush. He didn't have to. Brad was frozen with fear. Bradley Turner Miller said, "We have you on audio recording demanding $500,000 in exchange for a minor child. That is extortion. That is trafficking. And in the state of Georgia, that is a felony that carries up to 20 years. 20 years, Brad whispered. His face went gray. Miller nodded. Unless what? Brad asked, hope flickering in his eyes like a dying candle. Unless you sign the papers, I said, pointing to the document on the ground. Brad looked at the papers fluttering in the wind. If you sign the voluntary termination of parental rights, Reginald said, walking up. His voice smooth and professional, the district attorney might be persuaded to view this as a civil dispute rather than a criminal extortion case. You sign, you leave the state, you never contact Maya or Thaddeus again, and you stay out of prison. It was a choice between a cage and exile. Brad looked at me. He looked at the envelope. He looked at the sheriff. He realized he had been outplayed. He realized he wasn't the smart businessman he thought he was. He was just a grifter who had tried to con the wrong mark. "Do you have a pen?" he asked, his voice defeated. Reginald handed him a gold pen. Brad knelt down on the concrete floor of the gazebo. He smoothed out the papers. He didn't read them. He didn't ask about visitation. He didn't ask if he could say goodbye. He just signed. Page after page. He signed away his daughter. He signed away his future. He signed away his redemption. When he was done, he stood up. He handed the papers to Reginald. "Can I go now?" he asked. I walked up to him. I was close enough to smell the fear on him. "You can go," I said. "But listen to me, Brad. If you ever come back, if you ever call, if you ever send a letter, I won't call the sheriff next time." I let the threat hang there. I let him imagine what an old chef with a collection of very sharp knives might do to protect his blood. He gulped. He nodded. "I am gone," he said. He turned and walked away. He walked out of the park. He walked out of our lives. He didn't look back. He didn't look like a father. He looked like a ghost fading into the fog. Reginald checked the signatures. "It is legal," he said. "It is done. He has no rights. She is yours, Thad." I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. My knees felt weak. I sat down on the bench. "We got her," I whispered. "We saved her." Miller put a hand on my shoulder. "You saved her, Thad. You stood tall." I looked at the empty park. I thought about Vanessa in her cell. I thought about Brad walking to the bus station. They were gone. My family was gone. But I wasn't empty. I had Maya, and I had a lot of cooking to do. "Let us go home, Reginald," I said, standing up. "My granddaughter is waiting for me." And I promised her we would make cookies. We drove back to the house. The sun was starting to break through the gray clouds. When I walked through the front door, Maya was waiting in the hallway. She looked at me. She looked behind me, expecting to see her father. "He didn't come," she said softly. I knelt down. I took her hands in mine. "No, baby girl," I said. "He didn't come. He had to go away for a long time." She looked at me. Her eyes were sad, but they weren't surprised. She knew. Children always know who loves them and who just tolerates them. "Is he coming back?" she asked. "No," I said. "He is not." She nodded. She leaned forward and hugged me. Her arms were small, but her grip was strong. "That is okay, Grandpa," she whispered. "I like it better when it is just us. You make better pancakes anyway." I hugged her back. I held her tight enough to shield her from the world, but loose enough to let her breathe. "I love you, Maya," I said. "I love you too, Grandpa." I stood up. I wiped a tear from my eye. "Well then," I said, my voice returning to its usual boom. "If we are going to be roommates, we need to set some ground rules. Rule number 1. The chef always gets to taste the cookie dough." Maya laughed. It was a real laugh, a happy laugh. I walked into the kitchen. I tied on my apron. The house was mine. The girl was safe. And the oven was hot. It was time to get back to work. I took out the flour. I took out the sugar. Life, I thought, is like a recipe. Sometimes you get bad ingredients. Sometimes you burn the roast. But if you keep cooking, if you keep trying, you can always make something good. And this cookie was going to be the sweetest thing I ever made. The county jail is a place where time stops. It smells of bleach and despair and unwashed bodies. It is a place designed to strip you of your dignity, to remind you that you are no longer a person, but a number in a system. I sat in the visitation room on a bolted-down metal stool, waiting for the door on the other side of the plexiglass to open. My hands were folded on the cold steel counter. I was wearing my Sunday suit, the charcoal one I wore to church. I wanted to look like a father. I wanted to look like the man my daughter had underestimated. The phone call had come at 3 in the morning. It was the collect call that every parent dreads, but the one I had been expecting. Vanessa's voice was a jagged shard of glass cutting through the static. She was crying, not the angry tears of the dining room, but the terrified tears of a woman who has realized that the walls are real and they are closing in. "Daddy," she had sobbed. "Daddy, please. It is cold here. The women are scary. They took my clothes. Please get me out. I will do anything." I had listened to her beg for 10 minutes. I listened to her blame the police. I listened to her blame the stress. And then I listened to her blame the only person left to blame. Brad. It was Brad's idea, she had whispered. "He made me do it, Dad. He said we deserved the house. He said you were too old. I was scared of him. I just went along with it because I was scared." Lies. I knew my daughter. I knew she wasn't scared of Brad. Brad was her lapdog. She was the one holding the leash. But I told her I would come. I told her I would see her. Now the heavy steel door buzzed and clicked open. A guard led her in. I almost didn't recognize her. The Vanessa who walked into the room was a ghost of the woman who had slapped me. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. Her hair, the hair she spent hundreds of dollars a month maintaining, was pulled back in a greasy knot. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the pale skin and the dark circles under her eyes. She looked 10 years older. She looked broken. She saw me and her face crumpled. She practically ran to the stool, snatching up the black phone receiver. "Dad," she choked out, pressing her hand against the glass. "Oh God, Dad, thank you for coming. You have to get me out. Please. The bail is set at $50,000. I know you have it. I know you have the money now. Just pay it. Please. I will pay you back. I will work. I will do anything." I picked up the receiver slowly. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her. I looked at the desperation in her eyes. I looked for a flicker of the daughter I used to know, the one who used to make me handmade cards for my birthday. I couldn't find her. All I saw was a stranger in a cage. "Are you okay, Vanessa?" I asked, my voice calm. "No," she cried. "No, I am not okay. I am in jail. There is a woman in my cell who stares at me while I sleep. The food is inedible. The lights never turn off." "Dad, this is a mistake. I don't belong here." "You assaulted me, Vanessa," I said. "You tried to defraud me. You stole your mother's jewelry." I know she wept. I know, and I am sorry. I was crazy, but it was Brad. You have to believe me. He poisoned my mind. He told me you were holding out on us. He told me we needed the money for Maya's future. I did it for Maya, Dad. I did it for your granddaughter. Using Maya. Even in here, she was using her child as a shield. "Brad is gone," I said. She blinked. "What?" "I kicked him out," I said. "The morning they arrested you, I evicted him. He left with a trash bag." "Good," she spat, her eyes hardening for a second. "Good. I hope he rots. He did this. He pushed me. Dad, if you bail me out, I will testify against him. I will tell them everything. I will tell them he planned the whole thing. Just get me out. 50,000. It is nothing to you. You are rich, right? You proved that at breakfast." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I felt the envelope there. It wasn't a checkbook. It wasn't a bail bondsman's card. I pulled out a stack of photographs. They were glossy, high-resolution prints. The private investigator had been busy. I slid the first photo under the glass partition through the document slot. Vanessa looked down. She frowned. "What is this?" she asked. "Look at it," I said. She picked it up. It was a photo taken 2 days ago. It showed a restaurant terrace. A nice one. White tablecloths. Wine buckets. And sitting at the best table was Brad. He wasn't wearing his trash bag clothes. He was wearing a new shirt. He looked clean. He looked happy. He was laughing, his head thrown back, a glass of champagne in his hand. And he wasn't alone. Sitting across from him was a woman, younger than Vanessa, blonde. She was leaning forward, her hand resting on Brad's arm. She was laughing too. Vanessa stared at the photo. Her hand started to tremble. "Who is that?" she whispered. "That is Jessica," I said. "His secretary. Or as he calls her, his soulmate." I slid another photo through. This one was taken outside a jewelry store. Brad was putting a necklace around Jessica's neck. It was silver with a diamond pendant. A nice one. And another photo. Brad and Jessica walking into the Starlight Motel, the same motel where I found the credit card charges. Vanessa dropped the photos. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock and betrayal. But he is broke," she stammered. "You kicked him out. He has no money." I leaned forward. I spoke into the receiver, my voice low and hard. "He had money, Vanessa," I said. "He had your money. She shook her head. "What?" "Before the police came, before I evicted him, he emptied the joint account," I said. "The one you thought only you controlled. He took the cash you had been siphoning from my allowance. He took the emergency fund." $10,000, Vanessa. I watched the realization hit her. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. "He took my money," she whispered. "He took the money you stole from me," I corrected her. "And do you know what he is doing with it?" I pointed at the photos scattered on the metal ledge. "He is spending it on her. He is buying her steak dinners. He is buying her jewelry. He is paying for her apartment." I paused, letting the words sink in. "He isn't looking for a lawyer for you, Vanessa. He isn't trying to raise bail money. He is celebrating. He is celebrating the fact that you are in here and he is out there. He is celebrating his freedom." Vanessa let out a scream. It was a raw, primal sound of fury. She slammed her fist against the glass. "I will kill him," she shrieked. "I will kill him. That bastard, that thief. I gave him everything. I bought him that car. I bought him those clothes, and he steals from me. He learned from the best I said." She looked at me. Her face was red splotchy with rage. "Dad, you have to let me out," she begged. "Not to run. To get him. I will kill him. I swear to God." I sat back. I folded my hands. "I am not bailing you out, Vanessa," I said. Her jaw dropped. But you see what he did. You see how he used me. I am the victim here." "You are not a victim," I said, my voice rising just a little, filling the small booth. "You are a predator who got outsmarted by a parasite." I looked at the photos of Brad living the high life on stolen dime. He is eating steak, Vanessa. He is drinking champagne. He is sleeping in a soft bed next to a woman who isn't you, and he is doing it with the money you thought was your ticket to freedom. I stood up. The stool scraped against the floor. "He is spending your money while you sit here in an orange jumpsuit eating prison loaf," I said. "And do you know why? Because you chose him. You chose a weak, greedy man because you thought you could control him. You thought you could use him to get to my money. You brought a snake into your bed, and now you are surprised that you got bit." Vanessa was crying again, but this time it was different. It was the cry of someone who realizes they have been played. The cry of a con artist who got conned. "Dad, please," she moaned, sliding off the stool until she was kneeling on the floor on the other side of the glass. "Please don't leave me here. I can't stay here. I will die in here." "You won't die," I said. "You will survive. You will wake up every morning at 6 a.m. You will scrub floors. You will work in the laundry. You will learn what hard work feels like." I looked down at her through the glass. "You chose the wrong husband, Vanessa. And you treated the wrong father like garbage." I hung up the phone. The receiver clicked into the cradle. It cut off her sobs. It cut off her begging. I looked at her one last time. She was pressing her hands against the glass, mouthing the word "please" over and over again. I turned my back on her. I walked toward the heavy steel door. I buzzed the guard. The door clicked open. I walked out into the hallway. The air smelled better out here. It smelled like justice. I had one more stop to make. Brad thought he was safe. He thought he had gotten away with the money. He thought he was clever. He didn't know that I had given those photos to the police too. He didn't know that Reginald had filed a motion to freeze the assets he had stolen. He was eating steak tonight, but tomorrow he would be eating humble pie, and I was going to be there to serve it. I walked out of the jail into the bright afternoon sun. I adjusted my hat. I felt light. The burden of my daughter's betrayal was still there, but it was lighter now. She was where she belonged. She was in timeout, a very long, very expensive timeout. Now it was time to go get my granddaughter. It was time to bring Maya home. And it was time to teach Brad the final lesson. The lesson that you can run from a lot of things, but you can't run from a chef who knows how to use a knife. And I was ready to carve. The divorce hearing was held in a small, windowless room that smelled of floor wax and broken promises. It was a bleak setting for the end of a marriage that had been built on greed and was now ending in ruin. I sat in the back row next to Reginald. I was just an observer, a ghost in the room. Vanessa sat at the defendant's table wearing her orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed to a metal loop in the floor. She looked haggard. Jail had stripped away her vanity, leaving behind a raw, angry woman who realized she had bet on the wrong horse. Brad sat on the other side. He looked even worse. He was wearing the same clothes he had left my house in weeks ago, but they were stained and wrinkled now. He hadn't shaved. He looked like a man who was sleeping in his car, which he probably was. He wouldn't look at Vanessa. He wouldn't look at me. He stared at the judge with the desperate intensity of a drowning man looking for a piece of driftwood. The judge was a tired woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She was flipping through the file, her brow furrowed. "We are here to determine the division of assets and debts in the matter of Turner versus Coleman," she said, her voice flat. "Although looking at these financials, it seems there are very few assets and a mountain of debt." Brad stood up. "Your Honor," he said, his voice shaking. "It is not my debt." She spent it. She controlled the cards. She bought the clothes, the trips, the jewelry. "I shouldn't be responsible for her shopping addiction," Vanessa screamed from her seat. "You liar. You were the one who wanted the crypto. You were the one who paid for your mistress with my card. Judge, he stole from me. He is the reason we are broke." "Order," the judge banged her gavel. "One more outburst and I will hold you both in contempt." She looked at the papers. "Mr. Turner, you are claiming that you are destitute. You are requesting spousal support from Ms. Coleman based on future inheritance expectations. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brad said, pointing a trembling finger at me in the back of the room. "Her father, Thaddeus Coleman, he is wealthy. He has a house worth $1 million. Vanessa is his only heir. When he passes, there will be assets. I supported her for years. I deserve a share of that potential estate." I felt Reginald stiffen beside me. This was it. The moment they dragged my name into the mud. The moment they tried to spend money I hadn't even left them yet. They still thought small. They thought my wealth was a house and a pension. They thought I was a retired cook who got lucky with real estate prices. Reginald stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He picked up his briefcase. "Your Honor," he said, his voice booming in the small room. "If I may, I am Reginald Baxter, attorney for Mr. Thaddeus Coleman." The judge looked over her glasses. "Mr. Baxter, I know you. What is your interest here?" "My client has been named as a financial resource in this petition," Reginald said, walking to the front of the room. "Mr. Turner is basing his financial future on the assets of Mr. Coleman. I am here to clarify the extent and the disposition of those assets so the court can make an informed decision." Brad smirked. He thought Reginald was there to confirm the house value. He thought he was about to get a payday. Vanessa looked hopeful for the first time in weeks. She thought maybe I was going to bail them out. Reginald opened his briefcase. He pulled out a thick binder. He placed it on the judge's bench. "First," Reginald said, "let us address the living situation of Mr. Turner. You listed your current address as Unit 4B at the Overlook Apartments on 4th Street. Is that correct, Mr. Turner?" Brad nodded. "Yes. A friend let me crash there." "I am subletting," the Overlook, Reginald said, turning to face the room. "A mid-range complex. 80 units. Not luxury, but respectable." He looked at Brad. "Did you know, Mr. Turner, that the Overlook Apartments are owned by a holding company called TC Ventures?" Brad frowned. "So what?" "TC stands for Thaddeus Coleman," Reginald said. The room went silent. Brad blinked. "What?" "Mr. Coleman bought that building 15 years ago," Reginald continued. "It is one of 12 residential properties he owns in the greater metro area. He is your landlord, Mr. Turner, and according to my records, Unit 4B is 3 months behind on rent. The eviction notice you received yesterday, it wasn't from a faceless corporation. It was from him." I watched Brad's face. The color drained out of it like water from a tub. He looked at me. His eyes were wide with shock. He was living in my building. He was sleeping under my roof. And he didn't even know it. "And Ms. Coleman," Reginald said, turning to Vanessa. You have listed a significant debt to City Trust Bank. A personal loan of $50,000 and 3 maxed-out credit cards totaling another $40,000. You claim the bank was harassing you. Vanessa nodded slowly. They call me every day. They are aggressive. City Trust Bank, Reginald said, is a regional institution. A solid bank. Very conservative. They have a board of directors that oversees high-risk loans. He paused for effect. Mr. Thaddeus Coleman has sat on that board for 20 years, Reginald said. He is the majority shareholder. He owns 12% of the bank. Vanessa gasped. She covered her mouth with her cuffed hands. You mean, she whispered. I mean, Reginald said that every time you missed a payment, every time you overdrew your account, the notification went to a report that sat on your father's desk. He didn't intervene because he wanted you to learn fiscal responsibility. He owns the debt, Vanessa. He owns the bank that owns the debt. The judge looked at the binder. She flipped through the pages. Her eyes got wider with every page. Mr. Baxter, she said, her voice hushed. This list of assets, this is extensive. It is, Your Honor, Reginald said. Mr. Coleman is not merely a retired chef. He is the silent partner in the largest food distribution network in the state. He owns the land that the new stadium is built on. His net worth is not measured in hundreds of thousands. It is measured in tens of millions. The air left the room. Brad made a sound like a dying balloon. He slumped into his chair. He looked at me. He looked at the old man in the Sunday suit, the man he had called a burger flipper, the man he had laughed at. He realized he hadn't just insulted a father-in-law. He had insulted a titan. He had tried to steal crumbs from a man who owned the bakery. Vanessa started to cry. But it wasn't the fake crying from the trial. It was the crying of someone who realizes they had held a winning lottery ticket in their hand their entire life and had thrown it away because they didn't like the paper it was printed on. You have millions, she sobbed, looking at me. Millions, Dad. And you let us live like that. You let us struggle. I stood up. I walked to the railing that separated the gallery from the court. I didn't let you struggle. Vanessa, I said, my voice calm but hard. I let you live. I gave you a debt-free education. I gave you a down payment on a house. I gave you every opportunity to build your own wealth. But you didn't want to build. You wanted to take. I looked at Brad. You called me a loser, Brad. You said I was a dinosaur. You said I didn't understand the new economy. I pointed at Reginald's binder. I built that economy, son. I built it with sweat and smarts and patience, things you know nothing about. You were playing with digital coins while I was buying the concrete under your feet. Brad put his head on the table. He couldn't look at me. The shame was physical. It was crushing him. Reginald turned back to the judge. Your Honor, my client is requesting that any claim to his estate by Mr. Turner be dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Coleman has also instructed me to inform the court that he is calling in the debts owed to City Trust Bank. He is initiating foreclosure proceedings on any assets tied to those loans. The judge nodded. Motion granted. Mr. Turner, you have no claim here. You are destitute. She banged the gavel. The hearing is adjourned. Brad didn't move. He stayed with his head on the table. He was broken. He had lost his wife. He had lost his freedom. And now he realized he had lost a fortune he never even knew existed. Vanessa was led away by the bailiff. She looked back at me one last time. She looked at the man she had slapped. She didn't see a victim anymore. She saw a giant, and she saw the wall she had run into at full speed. I walked out of the courtroom. Reginald walked beside me. That went well, he said. I nodded. It went well. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The secret was out. I didn't have to hide anymore. I didn't have to pretend to be the simple old man. I was Thaddeus Coleman. I was a millionaire, and I was free. We walked to the elevator. What now, Thad? Reginald asked. Now, I said, pressing the button for the lobby, we go to the office. I have a meeting with the board at City Trust. About the loans, Reginald asked. About the future, I said. I wasn't just going to foreclose on Vanessa. I was going to use that bank to help people who actually wanted to work. I was going to start a program for small business loans for people in my old neighborhood. I was going to use my money to build, not to destroy. But first I had to deal with Brad. He was still in the courtroom, probably trying to figure out how to pay rent to a landlord he had just tried to rob. He would be coming out soon. He would be looking for a lifeline. But there were no lifelines left. Only lessons. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. I didn't look back. The billionaire had revealed himself. And the world looked different now. It looked cleaner. It looked honest. And it looked like it was finally time for lunch. The air conditioning in the county courthouse hummed with a low mechanical drone that did little to cool the heat rising from the defendant's table. I sat in the front row of the gallery behind the prosecutor, my hands resting on the handle of my cane. I did not need the cane to walk, but it added a certain gravitas, a certain weight to my presence. It reminded everyone that I was an old man, a vulnerable man, the kind of man the law was written to protect. Vanessa sat 10 feet away. She was not wearing her jail jumpsuit today. Her lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Sterling, no relation to my Sterling, had dressed her in a soft blue cardigan and a modest skirt. Her hair was down brushed to look innocent. She wore no makeup. She looked like a schoolteacher who had been wrongly accused of jaywalking. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue every time the jury looked her way. It was a performance. A good one. But I knew the director. Mr. Sterling stood up to cross-examine me. He smoothed his expensive tie. He smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He walked toward the witness stand where I was sitting. He wanted to paint me as the villain. He wanted to paint me as the tyrant who had driven his poor daughter to a moment of madness. Mr. Coleman, he began, his voice dripping with false respect. You are 75 years old, is that correct? That is correct, I said, my voice steady, and at that age it is common to experience confusion, forgetfulness, mood swings. Isn't it true that you have been difficult lately? That you have been hoarding your assets? That you have been taunting your daughter and her husband with your wealth? I looked at him. I looked at the jury. 12 ordinary people who were trying to decide if a daughter hitting her father was a crime or a tragedy. I am old Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. I am not confused. I know the price of a pound of butter. I know the interest rate on my savings account. And I know the difference between a hug and a slap. Sterling paced. But you provoked her, didn't you? You refused to help her. You refused to sign papers that would have secured her future. You held your money over her head like a weapon. You backed her into a corner until she snapped. I leaned forward. The microphone creaked. I didn't back her into a corner, I said. I refused to let her rob me. There is a difference. A bank teller doesn't provoke a robber by locking the vault. He is just doing his job. My job was to protect what I built. Her job was to respect it. She failed. Sterling tried to interrupt, but I kept going. She didn't snap because she was desperate, I said, looking directly at Vanessa. She snapped because she was entitled. She hit me because, for the first time in her life, she heard the word no. And she didn't like the taste of it. The jury was watching me. They weren't looking at a frail old victim anymore. They were looking at a man who stood his ground. Sterling flushed. He tried to pivot. He tried to bring up my health, my eyesight, my hearing. But every question he asked, I batted away with the precision of a chef boning a chicken. I was sharp. I was clear. I was the witness they couldn't break. When I stepped down, I felt the shift in the room. The sympathy Sterling had tried to build for Vanessa was evaporating. But the final nail in the coffin wasn't me. It wasn't the video from the teddy bear which the jury had already seen and gasped at. It was Maya. My granddaughter was sitting in the judge's chambers waiting. We had debated this. Reginald, my lawyer, had argued against it. He said it was too traumatic. He said she was too young. But Maya had insisted. She said she had something to say. She said she wanted to tell the judge about the nights her parents forgot to feed her because they were arguing about crypto. She wanted to tell them about the way they talked about me when they thought she was asleep. The judge, a stern woman with grandchildren of her own, cleared the court for Maya's testimony, but allowed the jury to remain. Maya walked in holding the hand of a court-appointed advocate. She looked small in the big chair. Her feet didn't touch the floor, but her voice was strong. It was the voice of a Coleman. Maya, the judge asked gently. Do you know why you are here? Yes, Maya said. Because my mommy hurt my grandpa. And how does that make you feel? The prosecutor asked. It makes me sad, Maya said. But it doesn't surprise me. Why not Maya? Because mommy and daddy, they are mean. Vanessa gasped from her table. She started to sob loudly, trying to drown out her daughter's words. The judge banged her gavel. Silence. Maya continued. They yell a lot. They throw things. Daddy broke a lamp last week because the internet was slow. Mommy told him he was useless. They call Grandpa names. They call him the old miser. They said they were waiting for him to die so we could get a boat. The jury stiffened. That was it. The motive. The malice. Out of the mouth of a 10-year-old. I am scared of them, Maya whispered. I don't want to go back to that house. There is no food there. Only Daddy's energy drinks and Mommy's wine. Grandpa cooks. Grandpa makes pancakes. I want to stay with Grandpa. She looked at me across the room. Her eyes were wide, pleading. He is safe, she said. That word hung in the air. Safe. It was what every child deserved and what Vanessa and Brad had failed to provide. Vanessa's lawyer tried to object, tried to claim alienation, but it was weak. The damage was done. Maya had painted a picture of a home wrought with greed and neglect, a home where an old man was a target and a child was an afterthought. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. It was a fast verdict. In criminal court, speed usually means guilty. When they came back in, Vanessa stood up. She was trembling. She looked at the foreman. We find the defendant, Vanessa Coleman, guilty of aggravated assault on a person over 65 years of age, guilty of attempted extortion, and guilty of elder abuse. Vanessa's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing into her hands. It wasn't a performance this time. It was the crushing weight of reality. The judge looked at her papers. She looked at Vanessa. She didn't look happy. She looked disappointed. Ms. Coleman, the judge said, you had everything. You had a father who loved you. You had a home, you had a child, and you threw it all away because you wanted a shortcut. You raised your hand against the man who raised you. That is a betrayal that goes beyond the law. It is a violation of the natural order. The judge took a breath. I am sentencing you to 5 years in the state correctional facility. You will serve a minimum of 3 years before you are eligible for parole. And upon your release, you will be subject to a permanent restraining order. You are to have no contact with Thaddeus Coleman or Maya Coleman until further review by the family court. 5 years. Vanessa screamed. It was a raw animal sound. No. No, you can't. I have a daughter. I have a life, Dad. Dad, help me. She turned to me. She reached out her hands as if she could grab me across the courtroom. Daddy, please, don't let them take me. I am sorry, I will be good. I promise I will be good. I stood up. I looked at her. I saw the fear. I saw the regret. But I also saw the bruise on my cheek and my mind's eye. I saw the eviction notice she had slammed on my table. I saw the tears in Maya's eyes when she talked about being hungry. I didn't look away. I didn't turn my back. I bore witness. I love you, Vanessa, I said quietly, though I knew she couldn't hear me over her own screaming. But I love justice more. The bailiffs moved in. They cuffed her hands behind her back. They led her away, kicking and screaming through the side door. The same door they take the murderers and the thieves through. She was gone. The courtroom began to empty. The reporters rushed out to file their stories. The jury filed out looking somber. I stood there for a moment, leaning on my cane. I felt light. The weight of the last month, the weight of the fear, the weight of the betrayal, it was lifting. Reginald Baxter walked over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. It is over, Thad, he said. Is it, I asked. The criminal case is over, Reginald said. Vanessa is gone. Brad is gone. The house is yours. The money is safe. He pointed to the side door where the advocate was leading Maya out. And she is safe. I looked at my granddaughter. She looked back at me. She didn't look traumatized. She looked relieved. She looked like a weight had been lifted off her small shoulders, too. I walked over to her. I knelt down, ignoring the creak in my knees. Ready to go home, baby girl, I asked. She nodded. Can we get ice cream? She asked. I smiled. The first real smile I had felt in weeks. We can get ice cream, I said. We can get anything we want. We walked out of the courthouse hand in hand. The sun was shining. It was a bright, clear afternoon, the kind of day that makes you believe in fresh starts. Brad was out there somewhere, probably sleeping in a shelter or riding a bus to nowhere. Vanessa was in a cell trading her designer clothes for an orange jumpsuit, but I was here. I was standing. I had my dignity, I had my granddaughter, and I had my kitchen. And tonight I was going to cook a meal that tasted like freedom. I opened the car door for Maya. Let us go home, I said. I have a new recipe I want to try. And this time the only people eating at my table would be the ones who deserved a seat. The weeks following the trial were a slow spiral into the abyss for my former son-in-law. Brad thought he had a safety net. He thought he had a backup plan. He thought that even with Vanessa in prison and me kicking him out, he still had Jessica, his mistress, and the apartment he had secretly rented for her. He walked away from my house with his trash bag of electronics, believing he was just moving on to his second life. He didn't know that I owned the building on 4th Street. He didn't know that Reginald had already sent the eviction notice to Unit 4B. I heard the story later from the building superintendent, a good man named Oscar who had worked for me for 15 years. He told me Brad showed up at the apartment sweating and desperate, dragging his bag of computer parts. He tried his key in the lock. It didn't turn. He jiggled it. He pounded on the door. Jessica opened it. But she didn't open it to let him in. She opened it to throw his clothes into the hallway. She was wearing a silk robe he had bought her with my daughter's money. She looked at him with the cold eyes of a woman who checks the stock market before she checks her heart. "Where is the money, Brad?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. Brad stammered. He told her about the trial. He told her about the frozen accounts. He told her about the eviction. He told her he needed a place to stay just for a while until he got back on his feet. He told her he loved her. Jessica laughed. It was a sound that echoed down the hallway. "You are broke," she said. "You are homeless. And you are useless. Why would I let you in?" "But I paid for this apartment," Brad screamed. "I paid the rent for 6 months. "And the lease is in your name," she said. "But the eviction notice that came this morning says you are out in 24 hours. And guess what, Brad? I found a new sponsor, one who isn't afraid of his father-in-law." She tried to close the door. Brad tried to push his way in. He dropped his trash bag. He begged. Oscar stepped out of the elevator then. He is 6'4" and weighs 250 pounds. He put a hand on Brad's chest. "You are disturbing the tenants, Mr. Turner," Oscar said. "And the owner has strict rules about noise." "The owner," Brad shouted. "Who is the owner? I want to speak to him." Oscar smiled. He pointed to the small brass plaque in the lobby. "TC Ventures, Thaddeus Coleman Ventures." Brad looked at the plaque. He looked at Oscar. He looked at the closed door of the apartment where his mistress was already packing her bags to leave him. The realization hit him. There was no escape. I was everywhere. I was the ground he walked on and the roof he tried to hide under. He left the building. He left his clothes in the hallway. He walked out into the city with nothing but the clothes on his back and the bitter taste of reality in his mouth. That was in July. By November, the city had turned cold. The wind coming off the river carried the bite of winter. The leaves were dead on the ground. I was in my kitchen. The house was warm. The smell of roasting vegetables and beef stock filled the air. I was making a soup, a hearty beef barley stew, the kind that sticks to your ribs and warms you from the inside out. I was teaching Maya how to dice carrots. "Keep your fingers curled, baby girl," I said, guiding her hand. "Let the knife do the work. Don't force it." She was learning fast. She had a natural touch. She was safe. She was happy. She didn't ask about her father anymore. She knew he was gone, and in her 10-year-old wisdom she understood that some people are just not meant to stay. The snow started falling around 6 o'clock. Big, heavy flakes that blanketed the driveway and turned the world silent. I heard a noise on the porch. It wasn't a knock, it was a thud, like something heavy falling against the door. I wiped my hands on my apron. "Stay here, Maya," I said. "Stir the pot. Don't let it stick." I walked to the front door. I turned on the porch light. I looked through the peephole. There was a man huddled in the corner of the porch trying to find shelter from the wind behind the decorative columns. He was wearing a dirty parka that was torn at the shoulder. He had a beard that was matted with ice. He was shivering so violently I could hear his teeth chattering through the wood of the door. I unlocked the door. I opened it. The cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of unwashed bodies and street grime. The man looked up. His eyes were sunken. His skin was gray. He looked like a ghost. But I knew him. It was Brad. The arrogance was gone. The crypto bro swagger was gone. The man who thought he was too good to work was now a man who looked like he hadn't eaten a hot meal in weeks. He looked at me. He looked past me into the warm, golden hallway. He smelled the soup. The aroma hit him, and he let out a low moan of pure hunger. "Thad," he whispered. His voice was a rasp, a broken thing. "Thad, please." I stood in the doorway. I didn't invite him in. I didn't step aside. I filled the frame. "Hello, Brad," I said. He tried to stand up, but his legs were too weak. He stayed on his knees. He looked like a penitent sinner at the gates of heaven, but he hadn't done the penance. "I am hungry," he said. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. It is cold, Thad. I am sleeping in the park. My shoes. Someone stole my shoes while I was sleeping." I looked at his feet. He was wearing old boots that were 2 sizes too big, held together with duct tape. "Please," he begged, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. "Just a bowl. I can smell it. Just a bowl of soup. And maybe a blanket. I will sleep in the garage. I won't bother you, just for tonight. Please. I am dying out here." I looked at him. I remembered the day he sat at my table and laughed while my daughter slapped me. I remembered the day he tried to sell my granddaughter. I remembered the day he told me I was useless. He wanted mercy. He wanted me to save him again. He wanted to crawl back under the wing of the man he had despised. I felt a twinge of pity. It is hard to see a human being reduced to this. But then I remembered the lesson. If you feed a stray cat, it never learns to hunt. If you bail out a man who hasn't learned his lesson, he just digs a deeper hole. "Wait here," I said. Brad's eyes lit up. He thought he had won. He thought the old soft Thad was back. "Thank you," he sobbed. "Thank you, God." I closed the door. I didn't lock it, but I closed it. I walked back to the kitchen. "Grandpa, who is it?" Maya asked, looking up from the stove. "Just a man looking for direction," I said. I walked to the pantry. I didn't grab a bowl. I didn't grab a ladle. I reached up to the top shelf. I pulled down a book. It was a thick paperback. The cover was worn. It was a basic cookbook, the one I used to give to my line cooks on their first day. The Joy of Cooking Basics. Then I went to my desk. I pulled a business card from the drawer. It was a card for the Coleman Community Kitchen, the soup kitchen I had funded on the south side of the city. The one that served 3 hot meals a day to anyone who walked through the door. But there was a catch at my kitchen. If you were able-bodied, you had to work for your meal, you had to peel potatoes, you had to sweep the floor, you had to earn your keep. I walked back to the front door. I opened it. Brad was trying to stand up, smiling, shaking with relief. He moved toward the opening, ready to come in, ready to be saved. I held up my hand. "Stop." Brad froze. "Thad." "The soup." I held out the book. I held out the card. "Take these," I said. Brad looked at the book. He looked at the card. He looked confused. "What is this?" he asked. "This," I said, tapping the book, "is how you learn to feed yourself. It has a recipe for soup in there. Potato soup. Costs about $2 to make a pot." "But I don't have a kitchen," Brad cried. "I don't have ingredients." I handed him the card. "And this," I said, "is a place where you can eat. It is open 24 hours. It is warm. They have beds." He looked at the address. "The South Side. That is 5 miles away." "I can't walk 5 miles. "You walked away from this family," I said. "You walked away from your daughter. You walked away from your dignity. 5 miles is a short trip compared to that." Brad stared at me. The hope died in his eyes, replaced by the cold reality of his choices. "You are not going to let me in," he whispered. "No," I said. "I am not. This house is for family, Brad. And you made it very clear that you are not family. You are a guest whose invitation was revoked." "But I am starving," he screamed. "Then go to the kitchen," I said, pointing to the card. "But listen to me, Brad. When you get there, don't ask for a handout. Ask for an apron." "An apron?" he asked, bewildered. "If you want to eat at my table, you have to cook," I said. "That kitchen runs on work. You peel the potatoes, you get the stew. You wash the dishes, you get the bed. You want to survive, you have to work for it. Just like I did. Just like Marcus is doing right now," Marcus Brad asked. "Marcus is working," I said. "He is sorting trash. He is tired. He is dirty. But he is fed. And he is earning his way back. You want redemption, Brad? It is waiting for you in the scullery." I put the book and the card in his trembling hands. "Go," I said. "The dinner service starts in an hour. If you hurry, you might make the first shift." Brad looked at the book. He looked at the card. He looked at the warmth of my house, the light spilling out onto the snow. He realized then that the door was truly closed. He realized that the ATM was broken. He realized that the only way up was through the work he had spent his life avoiding. He didn't scream. He didn't curse. He just slumped. He turned around. He clutched the book to his chest like it was a Bible. He started walking down the steps. He walked into the snow. He headed south toward the city, toward the kitchen, toward the work. I watched him go. He looked small in the night, but he was moving. He was walking toward something real. I stepped back inside. I closed the door. I locked it. I walked back to the kitchen. Maya was stirring the pot. The smell of beef and barley was rich and heavy. "Is he gone?" she asked. "He is gone, baby girl," I said. I picked up a spoon, I dipped it into the pot, I tasted the broth. It needed a little more salt. I added a pinch. I stirred. Perfect. I looked at my granddaughter. She was the future. She was the legacy, and she knew how to cook. We sat down to eat. The house was warm, the food was good, and the world outside was cold and hard. But inside we had everything we needed, because we had built it ourselves. And Brad had a long walk ahead of him. But for the first time in his life, he had a direction. He had a recipe. Now he just had to learn how to follow it. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen curtains, painting stripes of gold across the butcher block island where Maya sat perched on a high stool. Her legs swung back and forth, a pendulum of pure childhood innocence that had been missing from this house for far too long. The air smelled of yeast and caramelized sugar, the kind of smell that reaches into your chest and unties the knots of anxiety you didn't even know you were holding. I stood beside her, my large scarred hand covering her small one, guiding her grip on the rolling pin. We were making biscuits, not the canned kind Brad used to eat, not the frozen kind Vanessa used to buy. These were the real deal, the Coleman family secret, the recipe that had bought this house and built an empire. Gentle baby girl, I whispered, my voice rough with emotion. You have to treat the dough like it is a living thing. If you work it too hard, it gets tough. If you are patient, it rises. Maya looked up at me, her eyes wide and trusting. She had a smudge of flour on her nose. She looked so much like Beatrice in that moment that my heart skipped a beat. Like this grandpa, she asked, rolling the pin lightly across the floured surface. Just like that, I said. You have the touch, Maya. You have the hands. Your mother, she never had the hands. She always tried to force it. She wanted the result without the process. I watched her cut the rounds with the old tin cutter I had used for 40 years. She placed them on the cast iron skillet one by one, making sure they touched, so they would rise high. This is the secret, I told her. They need each other to rise. Just like family. If they stand alone, they dry out. If they stand together, they stay soft. She nodded, taking the lesson in with a solemnity that belonged to someone much older. She had seen what happened when families stopped supporting each other. She had seen the handcuffs. She had seen the eviction. She knew the cost of bad ingredients. We put the skillet in the oven. I set the timer. While the biscuits baked, we went to the study. Reginald Baxter was waiting there. The room felt different now. The shadow of the drilled safe was gone, covered by a new painting I had bought. The air didn't smell of desperation anymore. It smelled of lemon polish and old books. Reginald stood up as we entered. He looked at Maya, then at me. "Is it time, Thad?" he asked. "It is time," I said. I sat behind my desk. The leather chair creaked familiar and comforting. Reginald opened his briefcase and laid out the document. It was thick, bound in blue paper. The last will and testament of Thaddeus Coleman. I picked up my pen. It was a heavy fountain pen, the one Beatrice gave me when I opened my third restaurant. Reginald cleared his throat. "Just to be clear for the record, Thad," he said, his voice professional but tinged with a personal satisfaction. "You are leaving the entirety of the estate, the real estate portfolio, the investment accounts, the hidden capital, and the intellectual property to Maya Coleman." "That is correct," I said. "However," Reginald continued, looking at Maya, who was coloring in a book on the floor, "she cannot access the principal until she turns 25, and only then if she completes a financial literacy course and maintains gainful employment for at least 3 years. I nodded. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. I wasn't going to hand a fortune to a child who didn't know the value of $1. Maya would be rich, yes. But first, she would be capable. She would know how to work. She would know how to cook. She would know that money is a tool, not a personality trait. "And regarding the other parties," Reginald asked. I dipped the pen in the inkwell. "Vanessa Coleman and Bradley Turner." I said, my voice flat. Reginald pointed to a specific clause on page 10. "I leave to my daughter Vanessa Coleman and my son-in-law Bradley Turner the sum of $1 each," he read. $1, I repeated. "It is a specific legal strategy," Thad Reginald explained, though we both knew why I was doing it. "If you leave them nothing, they can argue you forgot them. They can argue it was an oversight. They can contest the will. But by leaving them $1, you are stating for the record that you remembered them. You thought about them. And you decided that $1 was exactly what they were worth." "It is perfect," I said. I signed my name. The ink flowed black and permanent. Thaddeus Coleman. I looked at the signature. It wasn't just a name, it was a seal on a closed door. Vanessa would never touch this house. Brad would never drive my cars. They would get their dollar. They could buy a pack of gum and think about the empire they threw away because they couldn't wait for breakfast. I put the pen down. "It is done," I said. Reginald witnessed the signature. He stamped it with his notary seal. The sound was loud and final. Ka-chunk. The timer in the kitchen dinged. "The biscuits," I said, standing up. Reginald smiled. "I should be going, Thad." "Stay," I said. "You earned a biscuit, Reginald. You helped me take out the trash." We walked back to the kitchen. The smell of baking dough filled the house. It pushed away the memory of Brad's cheap cologne. It pushed away the echo of Vanessa's screaming. I pulled the skillet out of the oven. The biscuits were golden brown, tall and steaming. They were perfect. I plated them up. I brought out the butter and the blackberry jam Beatrice used to make. Maya climbed back onto her stool. Reginald sat at the end of the table. I sat at the head. I looked around the room. The dining room was bathed in light. The dust motes danced in the air. The silver was polished. The crystal sparkled, but there were empty chairs. Vanessa's chair was empty. Brad's chair was empty. For a moment, a wave of sadness hit me. A father always wants his table to be full. A father always wants his children to be there. I remembered Vanessa as a baby in a high chair making a mess with peas. I remembered the hope I had when she married Brad. But then I remembered the slap. I remembered the cold look in her eyes when she told me to sign the papers. I remembered Brad laughing as I fell. The sadness evaporated. It was replaced by a profound peace. Those chairs weren't empty. They were free. They were free of greed. They were free of manipulation. They were free of the toxicity that had poisoned this house for years. I looked at Maya. She was splitting a biscuit, steam rising into her face. She slathered it with butter. She took a bite and closed her eyes, humming with delight. "Is it good, baby girl?" I asked. "It is the best, Grandpa," she said with a mouthful. "You are the best cook in the world." "I am not just a cook," I said. "I am a teacher, and you are going to be my best student." Reginald took a bite of his biscuit. He nodded slowly. "You know, Thad," he said, wiping a crumb from his lip, "you could have just evicted them. You didn't have to do the whole breakfast charade. You didn't have to serve them." I took a sip of coffee. "Yes, I did, Reginald," I said. "I had to serve them one last time. Because that is who I am. I am a provider. I provided them with a home. I provided them with money. And in the end, I provided them with the consequences of their actions." I looked at the empty spot where Brad had dropped his trash bag. "I served them justice," I said. "And justice is best served hot." Maya looked at me. "Grandpa?" she asked. "Are Mom and Dad ever coming back?" I reached out and brushed a crumb off her cheek. "No, Maya," I said. "They are on a different path now, a path they chose. But we are here, we are together, and we have everything we need." She nodded, accepting this truth. She didn't ask again. She just reached for another biscuit. We finished breakfast in peace. There was no shouting. There was no demand for money. There was no tension. Just the sound of forks on china and the quiet hum of a house that was finally at rest. I looked out the window at the garden. The flowers were blooming. The world kept turning. I was 75 years old. I had lost a daughter, but I had gained a future. I looked at Maya. She was my second chance. And this time I wasn't going to fail. I was going to raise her to know that respect is earned, not inherited. I was going to raise her to know that family is about who sits at the table when the food is gone, not just when the feast is served. I took one last bite of my biscuit. It tasted like victory. Respect is not a gift you give to the elderly. It is a debt you owe to those who built the ground you stand on. My daughter thought my silence was weakness, and my patience was submission. She learned too late that the hand that feeds you can also be the hand that locks the door. You cannot beat a parent into submission and expect to inherit their blessing. In the end, she inherited exactly what she gave me, a cold, empty room and a lifetime of regret. If you enjoyed the story of justice served hot, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share these stories with the world. And tell me in the comments, what is the best meal you have ever had and who did you share it with? I read every single one. Until next time, keep your kitchen clean and your conscience clearer.